Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 241. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's guest is Kim Stafford. He'll be here in just about 10 minutes. Before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry and know you do too, so please do click the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Anything you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be much appreciated. Now, as always, we like to start with our Poets Respond poet. And today's poet is Alejandro, a great veteran of Poet Respond. I think he just passed Abby E. Murray for the most Poet Respond poems. He sends one almost every week, and we always love it. It's sort of like no matter what happens in the week, I get a great poem from Alejandro. And here he is, Alejandro Escudé. Hey, Alex, how you doing?
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm great. It's great to see you again. It's been a bit. I think it's been, I don't know, maybe 9 or more months since we've had you on, but you're definitely one of the best Poet Respond poets. And you wrote a poem this week about the eclipse, which was
Yes.
both, it was one of those weeks where we had almost 200 submissions for Poet Respond, and they were almost all about the eclipse. It was probably like 180 out of 200 poems were about the eclipse. We had a poem about the eclipse last week too. And so it was like, how do you write about it without repeating the same thing? And what you ended up with, I like to think of it as like an Andy Rooney style rant. It's kind of what it was.
That's my poetry, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Andy Rooney in poetry. So let's hear, let me know, why did you start writing this poem? Why were you motivated to write it, first of all?
I always try to see the other side, I kind of know what news story is out there, and then I don't know, my brain just goes there, trying to think of the contrarian view, seeing if there's anything there to say. But it's not like I don't believe it. I have to believe it in order to write about it. So it's not that I just do it just to be different, I did have that thought when I was looking at the pictures, that this is okay, this is another overblown thing, and and so I wanted to say it because I knew it would be annoying to people who were like, but it's an eclipse, it's a real eclipse. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw last week's episode, but George Bilguer was on, and he was right over where the eclipse was. And guest
Yeah,
after guest on the open lines at the end too were talking about how it was an amazing experience.
yeah.
Me and Katie were in Texas last week,
Oh,
and we thought we were right near where it was going to be, and then it was so cloudy that literally we couldn't tell the difference. I mean, it was like as if like a darker, thicker cloud had maybe passed over on a
yeah.
regular cloudy day. It was literally the least inspiring or exciting moment in the history of any kind of waiting for a number on a clock.
Mm.
But everybody else was talking about the amazing spiritual journey. And I felt again jealous, like I was when the eclipse went through Portland. Maybe Kim Stafford can talk about the eclipse from 2017. Um, but I don't know. It's interesting. So it was interesting to see a take that was the opposite of what everybody was talking about, because it did feel like something special if you were right there.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it felt probably those kind of events felt special to some Aztec a long time ago too, and some other guy in the same village was like, I don't care.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that too. This has been going on for the entire history of the human race, and maybe, and what are the odds of seeing it when you were, a hunter gatherer pre recording, prehistory. But it's interesting to think about. But let's hear your poem. Let's hear your
Okay.
do it in your Andy Rooney voice if you have
All
one.
right. I'll try my best.
Okay.
This is called Against the Solar Eclipse. It's a black swath that cuts across a part of the country that's a myth. Does Ohio even exist? Not here, where the post office blends with the sky and the cops drive black and white cars off freeway overpasses. In one photo, a man peers down a brass contraption like some 21st century Galileo. A pinprick on the sun shadowed by that communist rock in the sky. Or was it the other way around? I can't recall. It's all mathematical gibberish, if you ask me. A train stopped the traffic the other day, and that was more real than the eclipse. The sun is like an orange at the grocery store at age 50. Who still buys the citrusy orbs? In fact, the supermarket aisles are too bright these days. I should wear those ISO glasses they all wore to observe the eclipse. See what? Nature? Apocalypse? Down on this planet, it's light pandemonium. Hysteria denied. I've had enough of branded news. Music mimicking music. It's called the cosmos. The death trap beyond the atmosphere. Boneless graveyard. Aqueduct to nothingness. Honestly, I'll take God. He's not in fashion right now, but I prefer the ambiguity of faith to ignorance, which is what you see in crowds. Lawn chairs and binoculars, tents, motorhomes, a sheet afloat, the sun figured there, reflected, swallowed by time's stupid, arcing mouth.
Yeah, that's such a great contrarian view, Alex. Thanks so much for sharing that. Really fun poem this week. We were reading it in bed, cracking up at Friday night right
I'm
before
glad
we
I
fell
could see
asleep.
that.
Yeah, so I hope other people found that funny too and had a good time. And thanks, Alex. Always a pleasure, and congratulations on your regaining the lead. You and Abby. It used to be you, Abby, and Sonia Greenfield, but now it's just you and Abby duking it out. So congratulations. Right. She'll have to send like 2 poems a week for a little while to catch up with you again.
Very nice. Okay.
All right.
Take
care.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was Alejandro Escudé with Against the Solar Eclipse. Really fun poem from Sunday. And now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Kim Stafford. So sit tight, and I'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Kim Stafford. Kim is Emeritus Professor at Lewis and Clark College in Oregon. In 1986, he founded the Northwest Writing Institute and has published a dozen books of poetry and prose, including The Muses Among Us, Eloquent Listening and Other Pleasures of the Writer's Craft, and 100 Tricks Every Boy Can Do, How My Brother Disappeared. His most recent book is the poetry collection As the Sky Begins to Change, just out from Hen Press. Just out. It's hot off the press. He has taught writing in dozens of schools and community centers, and in Scotland, Italy, Mexico, and Bhutan. In 2018, he was named Oregon's 9th Poet Laureate for a 2-year term. He was also the guest on Rattlecast number 137 a couple years ago. Great to have him back. Here he is, Kim Stafford. Hey, Kim, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so glad to be with you, Tim.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. It was one of the most educational, I'd say, episodes of the Rattlecast we had when you were on. I mean, there were so many great insights that you had, and you're doing so much to spread poetry in different ways than most people are. It's not just traditional book publishing for you. It's a whole lot of ideas and different concepts and stuff. And it's great to talk to you again.
Well, my problem is, poems come so frequently, and the spigot is too tight, to get into literary magazines. I can't stand to wait, so I just have poems go forth in all directions.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great way to do it. Which is weird to say for me, is I rely on those submissions as our entire sort of business model for a literary magazine. But at the same time, I understand the frustrations of that and the need for poetry to be more immediate, which is why we started the Poetry Response series in the first place. But before we start out and talk about that, let's read a poem so we can get the ball rolling with your actual poetry.
Okay, this is the first poem in the book, Tim, and it's called For the Birds Singing Before Dawn. And the setup is every morning I'm out in I take my walk in the dark, and it's 4 a.m, and by 5 I'm sitting in my writing shed, and it's dark outside, and I hear this bird begin to sing, and I just think, what is that guy doing out there? It's dark, it's not day yet, but it's singing. So I wrote this poem for that little bird, for the bird singing before dawn. Some people presume to be hopeful with no evidence for hope, to be happy when there is no cause. Let me say now, I'm with them. In deep darkness, on a cold twig in a dangerous world, one first little fluff utters a peep, a warble, a song, and in a little while, behold, first glimmer shows and a glow filters through misty trees, then the bold sun rises, then everyone starts bustling about. And that first crazy optimist, can we forgive her for thinking dawn by dawn, hey, I made that happen. And oh, life is so fine.
That was For the Birds Singing Before Dawn, the opening poem from As the Sky Begins to Change, another book by Kim Stafford from Hen Press, who does a great job publishing poems. So Kim, let's talk about that poetry as a daily practice. And sharing poems on Instagram. You have a wonderful afterword in this book talking about it, but how has sharing poems every day changed the way you work with poetry?
Well, it's partly a matter of the rapid passing of time, Tim. If a poem comes to me and it's fresh, sometimes it's from the news, it's from now. It's from this season, it's from this time in our world struggle. And I feel I want to move that poem by the shortest path to readers. And Instagram for me is the way to do that. And, then on to Facebook. I just think, what if someone out there needs this poem right now? I want to make it available. And, I could worry it longer. I could make it better, perhaps. I could make it more likely to last in time. But I think of something my dad said one time. He said, I can make any poem into a gem if I work to revise it long enough. But I'm more interested in chasing rabbits than making gems. Kind of a different way, just the joy of creation. I've made this thing, I've revised it, it usually goes through half a dozen iterations, and then there it goes. And my day is begun, my most important work is done. Time to celebrate.
Yeah, well, I just love the way you go about that. You've been doing it since, was it 2017 you started that?
Well, yeah, I started writing a poem every day in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was really the pandemic when, as I explained in the afterword, I was Poet Laureate and the pandemic came. I had 25 public appearances lined up. I had to cancel them all. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to keep being a public poet, put poems forth by posting a poem every day on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a kind of a service ethic that I had.
Yeah, well, you've been doing it for such a long time. And the thing about sharing poems on social media, it's interesting because we talked about it 2 years ago. We talked about how you share poems on your Instagram every day, and that sort of anxiety about publishing the poems, making the poems public, and how antiquated that concept is. I mean, it used to make sense that, to make something public was hard to do. You could stand up and shout your poem in a town square, but to actually print it out on a printing press was something that cost, capital, and it cost resources. It was hard to do. That was the technology of the day for so long. And the idea of publication stems from that time period where having a printing press is, that's why we have freedom of the press in this country. It's called press because it's a printing press. And that was so hard to do and so important. And nowadays, though, you publish things with the click of a button. And so what's interesting is in the time since, I've been thinking about this a lot more. I was thinking about it before we talked, and then even more after we talked. And I don't know if you saw an essay I wrote, but I argued for using curation as the word rather than publication. The idea that you have a poem in somewhere where it's been selected, whether it's in a book, you selected it to collect this into some object. In the same way we have copyright, where if you, put something in a permanent form, it's copyrighted, because it's an actual permanent form of what you've created, your intellectual property. In the same way, the fact that it being chosen as something to publish should be the idea that we, build our industry as literary magazines and publishers around, rather than publication, which any kid, my daughter has been publishing stuff. She's 13 years old. She's been publishing stuff for like 7 years, I think. And the idea that having to save your poems so you can't share them, so some magazine can be the first to publish them, is such a backward way of thinking about everything. And I think,
I want to say, though, that I honor magazines. I deeply honor the work that goes into Rattle and the portability of a conversation in poems among different people. That is a treasure. And I love publishing a book. But at the same time, I love conversation. This conversation we're having right now. And what if the impulse of poetry, the lyric creation of something musical, beautiful, could be closer to an extension of conversation than the fossil permanence of a book? There's a spectrum there. And I think Instagram is just maybe closer to conversation than the press. I do want to say, Tim, I have a Chandler and Price 10 by 15 letterpress in my basement. And I love that end of the spectrum very much. Something beautifully printed to last on archival paper. That is gold.
Yeah, well, it definitely is. And I'm not giving up publishing a magazine anytime soon. And I love making books too. I love making things. It's just so fun to be able to gather poems together and curate that. So what I argue in this article, though, is that the industry, the way that we model literary magazines, should be based on the idea of curation, that it's chosen for publication by somebody, and then that leaves poems free to be shared on social media. And I think that's what we've always done with Rattle. But in the time since, about a year ago, we switched our guidelines. We used to say, poems have to be previously unpublished, but we don't consider social media as publication. But that's just a lie. It's just not true, because it's actually public, And so social media is a means of publication. But what we really care about is the fact that somebody chose it and said, this is something that I think, of all the things out there, this is something that you should read. And I think if we organized our thoughts around that concept, we could say, I want to be the first to curate the poem, and it can be published. You can please do share it on social media, because that's the best thing you can do, is to share poems with people. But as long as we're the first magazine or book that it's appeared in, we're happy to publish it. And I think that makes a whole lot of sense. I'm trying to get more poetry magazines and publishers on board with this concept. But so my question, I guess, is what do you think about that? About focusing on, as far as literary magazines go, with curation as the sort of the linchpin, the term of art that we use, versus publication.
That word curation takes me to a museum. You step through the door of a museum and that someone who has had a lot of options has chosen a set of experiences for you to have. And you're in good hands. It's like being in the hands of a doctor or a teacher. Someone has created a space for you to have an experience that has been thoughtfully done. So I love that. In a way, I'm curating my Instagram account. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the poems, and I follow each poem with an image, often keyed to an image in the poem. And so it's a visual and verbal kind of online museum
Mm-hmm.
uh, that accumulates over time. And there's a today's page is the new work gallery
Mm-hmm.
in the museum. So I see a lot of overlap, and I hope you make headway. I hope more magazines see what good work Rattle is doing and get on board.
So, given that you've been sharing poems just openly on social media, which is what everyone's afraid of, we just sort of, you say we hoard our poems as if they're, they can't see the light of day until some magical thing 2 years down the line when they're
Yeah,
published and they become, so you have to, it's some kind of purity ritual to keep them safe and
yeah,
chaste or whatever until
yeah.
we reach. Have you ever had any issues with that? Like, how has that changed the way you think about publishing poems to be sharing it every day? Like, do you feel like, this book is all poems that have appeared online on your
Well,
Instagram?
not all of them, the short ones.
Okay, well, most of them.
The long ones don't fit.
Well, the long ones don't fit, but the ones, they've mostly appeared on your Instagram. Do you feel like
Yeah.
that changes the value of the poems in any way?
Well, so the book has maybe 100 poems, and in the time that those 100 poems came to my page, probably 300 to 400 were written. So it is curated, it's distilled, and they have one life when they come out. The day they come out, they have one life. But I think some poems should have more than one life. So, appear in a book. And I actually, some of them, there's an intermediary stage, which are my little self-published books that are, little chapbooks I make to give away. So, those are given hand to hand. So I'm modern and old-fashioned at the same time, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
They're online, they're in a little book that I've made, and then they're in a real book that Hen Press has published.
Yeah. Does it change the way you approach writing a poem, knowing that you're going to be sharing it right away?
Uh, yeah, well, I have a great good fortune to have a wife who every morning says, "Let me hear your poem."
Hmm.
And she also finds the typos in poems I've already posted, and then I have to take them down and redo them. Um, so, I'm writing for her. I'm writing for my friends. I'm writing for people I meet who say, "I read you every day." I want them to have a good start to their day. So I feel like I'm in a tribe of I'm hunting and gathering, and I'm bringing to the everyone's table what I can offer for what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another one of those poems. What do you want to read
Yeah.
next?
Okay. I want to read a little poem on page 19. It's called "To My Hand, the River Offers Rounded Stones." And I think of this poem, the genre is a charm. A charm, one of the oldest English forms of poetry is a charm, where to encourage something beautiful to happen in the world. And the first line, I just want to say, comes from something I learned in Vietnam. There's a name, a personal name that means the sleeve in the river through which a fish swims to become a dragon. I just love that. So that got into the first line. To my hand, the river offers rounded stones. Fish fit every sleeve of water. Here the cottonwood is making perfect leaves. Wren song flies in all directions, no impediment. Clover nectar welcomes tongues of bees. How can I be stingy here in heaven where our covenant is clear? The river brims with woven rain. Wind is whispering the trees.
Yeah, beautiful poem.
So
That
just a
was
little charm.
Yeah, that was "To My Hand, the River Offers Rounded Stones." Again, from As the Sky Begins to Change. And so what is your practice like of sitting down, writing a poem, again, knowing that you're going to be sharing it with everybody? Anybody can read it, and the idea is that as many people as possible will within hours. Does that alter the way that you write? Do you feel like maybe your poems are getting more accessible because of that, or shorter because of that, or
Yeah.
how does that affect you as a writer?
I think part of my practice, Tim, is an outgrowth of being a poet laureate for 2 years and going all over the state to all kinds of places. What kind of poem do I want to take into a prison, into a hospital, into a homeless shelter, to a group of veterans, to a group of immigrants, to a classroom? Um, and I think of something my father said. I might have quoted this last time we talked. He said, when you hand a poem to a reader, it's like handing a hot cup of coffee. It's polite to extend a handle, and I like to start a poem with the handle, with something quiet and friendly and easily apprehended. Start don't go to the heights, work your way toward the heights.
Mm-hmm.
So something friendly at the beginning. And, this is my daily page. I can't remember if we talked about this last time. I have this very rigorous, unchanging formula of these four elements: the date, what I call the boring prose. This is what I remember yesterday. This is what I'm thinking, where I'm writing before I'm writing poetry, so I can get some momentum. And then a thought. The third element is just a thought, and then something like a poem. Like the thought today was, does a writing school's obsession with craft result in surface decoration on a barren vision? A little bit accusatory. I love craft, but sometimes and I worry about this daily as I revise, am I making the poem better, more true, more necessary? Or am I just decorating it by getting some rhymes and some equally length lines? And, is craft in the way of my true quest, which is to touch the heart of a reader?
Yeah. Well, you didn't actually mention that page. That's a really interesting concept, to structure how a poem begins. Did you post that poem already on Instagram?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to read the whole? I'd love to hear that whole, all of what you wrote there and
Yeah,
how
sure.
that poem came
Okay,
to be.
so
That'd be
April
really fun.
16th. And my dad said, once I write the date on a piece of paper, I know I'm okay. I've made it to my writing. So a conversation with undergraduates and alumni last night at the Lewis and Clark Library. Why doesn't this happen more often? Overlapping curiosity and interests could be rich. I spoke too much, didn't listen enough. I often accuse myself. So, I'm just remembering I had this session with alumni and students, and, it got me wondering about elders and young people together. So does my thought then again, does a writing school's obsession with craft result in surface decoration or barren vision? So I'm sort of thinking of the outer and the inner. Here the alumni, they've achieved a career. The young people are wondering what their career will be. And then the poem, this is just the first version of it. Students meet alumni. So often the poem will grow out of my boring prose. There's an idea. Students meet alumni. One by one, the students speak their hopes and fears. How can this hard world engage their love? They hold the treasure, not yet knowing who they are. We alumni have crested our great divide by trying to fit the hard world, failing, then finding a nest apart. Don't give up, join us. We betrayed you, save us. So a quotation from the students and from the alumni. And then I went through 3 or 4 revisions, put it on Instagram, and that's the day.
Yeah, that's so fun. Do you have the final version? I was showing people the Instagram for those watching on screen. So if anyone wants to follow on Instagram, it's Kim Stafford Poetry. Instagram.com/Kim Stafford Poetry.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, and then you have photographs and things pinned and stuff like that. But then a few posts down is this poem that you wrote today. Yeah,
can't really, there's the poem on Instagram. Yeah. Do you want me to read the poem? The
Yeah, read
finished
that
or
version. 'Cause I'm
yeah.
curious about the little
Okay.
change you made. You had an
Yeah,
addition too.
so for one thing, it ended up being three stanzas, and I sort of fiddled around with the line breaks. Students meet alumni. One by one, the students speak their hopes and fears. How can this hard world engage their love? They hold a treasure, not yet knowing who they are. We alumni have crested our great divide by trying to fit the hard world, failing, then finding a nest apart, not quite knowing who we are. We betrayed you, say the old, save us. Don't give up, say the young. Join us in the possible.
Yeah. So it's great to see that
So it's a
poem.
call
Hmm.
to a vocation. Um, I don't know. The thing about Instagram, I guess this is true of any publishing, but you send a poem forth to find who needs it.
Hmm.
You don't know who that person will be. And one thing I talk about in the afterword is how a writer and a reader are both anonymous, and these anonymous figures meet each other in an experience of the reading of the poem.
Hmm.
And that's a magic thing. Two people meeting, two strangers, and I like to have that happen on a daily basis.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. That idea of two solitudes coming into contact with each other is
Yeah,
what really
yeah,
poetry is doing. How much of editing do you do? We had this edition in that poem. I'm looking at it right now, and the first time you
yeah,
read it, it didn't have that, which is such an
yeah,
interesting line. We betrayed you, say the
yeah,
old, save us. So that was an addition that
yeah,
must have come in the revision
yeah,
of the poem. So how did
yeah.
that addition come to be? Which is a great line. And how do you go from that page to what you end up with?
Yeah, one of my students taught me a really useful idea. She said, when I sit down to write, I don't tell myself I want to write a great poem. I tell myself I want to write a draft with promise, a draft with
Hmm.
promise, something that will call me back to spend some more time. And so often on the handwritten page, I don't feel I need to get a poem. I need to get a problematic beginning that requires something more.
Hmm.
And so when I looked at that draft and started going through changes on the computer, I came to a feeling of guilt. What's at stake for me? What's the world going to be like for my children? Have I betrayed them? Young people save us. So my soul got involved in what had just been a meeting that, oh yeah, we'd had this meeting yesterday. And the process of writing a poem, you come to the so what? So what? What's at stake? What's important here? Um, and I came to my guilt and my hope, and then the young people saying in response, join us in the possible.
Yeah. So how would you say you found that leap? And when we do the Rattles critique of the week every Friday, a lot of times I'll be at the end of the poem I'll say or think so what, like that were nice lines, things worked, but
Yeah,
like what did it add to? And until you have that, I don't know, that confession from the soul kind of, the
yeah,
poem doesn't really work. So if you
yeah.
have a poem like that, how do you find that leap to something that where the poem matters? Like how does the so what, how is that resolved?
Well, I don't know how to explain this, but I have had this experience, I think because I write every day. I get partway through revision and then the poem starts resisting. The poem starts to have an opinion and the poem talks back to me and the poem has that so what stance like, oh, so you've made this thing, Mr. Poet. You haven't impressed me yet. Take a risk. Come on, do something. And it's that pushback that gets me to tumble into the unsaid,
Hmm.
the not yet said, my favorite part of the process. And then out of nowhere, my favorite source, something comes like, we betrayed you.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem from the book.
Yeah. This one is one that came from the news. I thought of this as Alejandro was reading. It's the Supremes on page 64. And I wrote this and posted it the day that Roe versus Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court. And I started, thinking about the Supremes, that great group, uh, Diana Ross and all. And so, the way such a poem begins, you have like these two clusters of vocabulary. They have the judicial and the majority and, opinions and that cluster. And then you have the Supremes, greatest hits and anthem, and you just start writing a poem about the Supreme singing group, but really about the Supreme Court. So that's how this was. So the Supremes, they used to be so great. That string of hits in the 50s, 60s, 70s, off the charts. Their work set a precedent, others followed. When they got unanimous, their harmonies changed us. You felt a hum everywhere that came from them. A new kind of freedom flowed over the land. That one about kids in school, Brown versus Board of Education, there's a background here. That one about kids in school, the one about woman power, holy moly. When they held court, they were on a roll. You didn't need anyone's judgment call. They were tops. But I guess it couldn't last. They got some new blood, started doing covers by splinter groups, lost their mojo. Some died, some went solo. You couldn't really call them the Supremes anymore. They stopped setting the beat. No more anthems, just echoes.
And that was The Supremes by Kim Stafford from his newest book, As the Sky Begins to Change. And that brings up a really interesting point about sharing your poems on social media. Poet Respond does this too, where we explain what the poem's about. And there's an aspect I always found of readings, where if you just read the poem straight, because we had, I did a reading series every month for about 10 years, and seeing how different people do it. And the most entertaining poets always sort of set the mood, set the tone, gave you some expectations, knew what you were getting into before the poem. And it always occurred to me that, when we read a book, we're just given the poem straight without any kind of background. If you read that poem without knowing the news that day, you might not realize. I mean, even if it's like right there hitting us in the face with all the court references and things like that, but you might miss that. It might go completely over your head. And so there's some part about explaining what a poem was inspired by, like we do just spontaneously at readings, that makes the experience of poetry more pleasurable and memorable. And it always seems to me that the reason why we don't is because poetry is sort of locked in this academic world where, we have the professor and they get to say what the poem was actually about. And that it validates their job, in the poetry ecosystem. I'm the advisor next to the king whispering in their ear, telling us what the gods are actually saying. And because of that, we don't share the joy of poetry as much as we do when we're doing a reading, telling what the poems are about, or as you do, posting on social media where you can give the background and say, I was thinking about the Supreme Court and the Supremes came to mind, and this is the mashup. And the poem works so much better when we know that. So do you think this is a better medium because of that? Yeah.
The poem has to come out that day. Mm-hmm. That's when the poem is useful. And there's a denigrating term, an occasional poem, a poem written for an occasion. And it's often implied that, well, then it has no use after that, it has no value. It was written for that day. And my goal is to write a poem that will serve resonantly this day and have some lasting value. And what you were just saying about a reading, when I made the audiobook, I listened to 20 audiobooks of poems, and the poems were wonderful, but I found the format deadly. It was just poem, pause, poem, pause, poem, pause. And I thought, I want to make my audiobook like a reading where every second or third poem, you talk about the poem. You give some background. Here's how it started. Here's what I was thinking about. Like the setup, and then the poem. Yeah. So the audiobook has a lot of commentary. It's got some music between the sections and, more like a face-to-face event.
Yeah, the audiobook is so wonderful. I wanted to talk about that too. The other thing that I always think about as far as the reading goes and that introduction that we have, which a lot of times poets are really funny up there, they're telling what it's about. And then you get into the serious mode. It feels almost like we're at eating sushi, and then you have the ginger between to sort of cleanse your palate, because poetry is so dense. And then we have just sort of regular off the cuff talk in a different register. Just, this is not, not carefully crafted, that we're not paying attention to the music. We're just like rolling up our sleeves, talking about reality to give you a little break, like the ginger, before you bite into the next piece of sushi, which has all of that stuff compacted into one bite. And so I love the audio file you sent me, because you did that. You have, for each poem in the audiobook, you have that sort of palate cleanser where, if you're listening through, it's like too dense, it's too intense. There's too many like flavors in a poem to just eat piece of sushi after piece of sushi. You need something to cleanse your palate, and so you can actually appreciate all the things that are going on. And I think that's what happens at a reading, and we don't have that at all as the way that we're used to experiencing poetry. We're just stuck with binge eating the sushi.
So it was interesting. The guy, the engineer, a guy named Billy Oskey at Big Red Studio east of Portland in Corbett. He's done 300 music albums, Windham Hill and all kinds of top people. But he kept stopping me, Tim, and saying, your intros are too poetic and your poems are too conversational. People won't be able to tell the difference. And so, make it more informal in the introduction and then pause. And he would cue me, So I learned a lot about how to read a poem from this music engineer. He would say, no, do that again. Now who are you talking to? Make it like you're talking to someone. It's very helpful.
Yeah. So how do you think about that audiobook? How would people find that audiobook if they're interested in it, first of all?
Well, you can search for the title. I go to Libro.fm because that one credits my local bookstore, Annie Bloom's Books here in Portland. A portion of the sale goes to them. But Barnes & Noble has it. I think 50 different audiobook sources have it. You can just search for the title as the sky begins to change.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like anything is lost by virtue of it being available in that way? I mean, that's the thing. You talk about like hoarding poems in that afterword, which is why we really always want to encourage poems to be shared at Rattle. And we don't want people to hoard them. We want people to share them as widely, because the more people that are reading poems, the more writing poems, the better the world is. But do you feel like that might get in the way of book sales? Is that something that you worry about at all? Because you could find the poems this way rather than in the book from Red Hen Press. And did Red Hen Press have any, worries about that either?
They gave me their blessing. I checked ahead of time, and we worked out the contract so that I had the audio rights and so on. I think I was a medievalist in another life. I studied medieval literature, and there was a contemporary of Chaucer named John Gower, who his three major works, one is in French, one is in Latin, one is in English, because in the 14th century they didn't know which language was going to prevail. And I feel that way about poetry. There's some people that get their poetry on audiobooks. I want to be available to them. Some get it on social media. I want to be available to them. Some love a book. And so I feel like different audiences will receive the poetry through different venues. And I want to put it out there. There was I'm the literary executor of my dad, William Stafford, and there was a guy in Argentina who was putting all of my dad's poems online. Regardless of copyright. And I called Grable Press, Jeff Schatz, and said, Jeff, should we be worried about this? Oh, no. We'll sell more books. People in South America will want to buy the book. And I, didn't Chairman Mao say, let 1,000 flowers bloom? And he did evil things with that, perhaps, but I like the concept.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been, and actually, way back before I even started working at Rattle, I first came across Rattle in 2003. So that is 21 years ago. And they were already putting all their poems on the internet. Whereas other magazines would have like two or three to like sample the issue and then go buy it for fear that nobody would. And, I've always loved that stance for Rattle. And I've found too over the 20 years of doing this that if we have all the poems online. You can go back and look at anything. We put them out one poem at a time. But we just had, a poem from issue number 37 published. Today is the poem of the day because we had like nothing scheduled, so we put an old poem up, and we had an order for that book, that day, and that's exactly what. Like somebody said, "Oh, I want to read the other poems in this issue because I like this poem," and that's how the world actually works. It's not like this scarcity, world where you have to like hide everything. It's that the more you spread and share, the more grows, and it's this exponential growth that happens with poetry, not the inverse. And we're also afraid of not letting it grow.
Yeah, and we're creatures that have skin. There's something about a book that there's something about when I maybe you had this experience, Tim. First watched our son read a book when he was very young. And, to be able to open it and close it, to be able to go forward, go backward, close it, look off to the side, open it again. That's a very intimate and enclosed, it's like an enclosed garden of delights to be able to open a book like that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, an enclosed garden. That's actually what Eden means. The definition of Eden literally is a walled garden. And so each book is its own Eden. I love that concept.
Yeah. Well, I've got another poem here. And what this one does, the uses of poetry, to take a phrase that we hear in daily life and maybe even resent, but to take it seriously, to give it a chance. So this is on page 66. This conversation may be recorded for quality assurance. The thing about a writing practice, you're just sitting there and, I have that phrase in my little book because it struck me. So the day before I'd written it in my little book and I started thinking, well, what does that actually mean? Who's going to listen to it? And where are they? And what's their life like? You go down that rabbit hole of thought. So this conversation may be recorded for quality assurance. I'm glad somebody cares when I call customer service to ask about my last billing cycle and get a woman in India with a lovely accent, her voice freighted by satellite to sort my payment. How can I help you? And after we delve into enigma, beyond our conversation, somewhere later, far away, someone else prepares to listen for quality assurance. Perhaps a mother in North Carolina trying to make ends meet, or an immigrant in Chicago moonlighting to send money home. Think of it. We send our voices to mingle out there beyond this great emptiness, speaking our oldest human contact. Can I help? And then, alert to the timbre of a human voice, someone attends to how certain syllables may assure the quality of our essential bond. So make a little prayer out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this conversation may be recorded for quality assurance. It was a great title. Again, this is from As the Sky Begins to Change. And I think that's a great example of, the way that poetry is a kind of meditation that enriches our lives, that makes us, there's these little things that we all notice as we go through lives. And so many, people, I don't know what the percentage of the population that engages in some kind of art is, but the people who make art out of our life experiences, we get to appreciate it and enjoy and understand those little tiny things. How strange it is to say that conversation might be recorded and who might listen to it. I'm sure, half of the people in the world have come across that, thought who's listening to this? And then, but just they let it go, and we get to write poems about it. And that's the power of what poetry really does, is we get to explore those concepts more deeply.
Yeah, one thing I've thought of, again, in my daily writing practice, poetry is really about time, about stopping to think, to ponder, to wonder, And for the writer, it's about doing that, and for the reader to step back from the rushing frenzy of the imperatives that surround us and dwell on an idea. It's like a morsel of experience snatched from the rush of time.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's just such a great way to put it. Um, let's see. I want to make sure we do a good number of poems. We've been talking a lot. Let's do another one right away.
Yeah. So this is on page 95. This is I can tell about how this poem started. Our son was going to go up cross-country skiing on Mount Hood, and it was stormy, and I worried about him, the parental, will he be okay? Will he get lost? What if he breaks a ski out in the forest and everything? So I woke up and I thought, now before he drives away, I'm going to give him this advice I've heard that if you're lost in snow, you find a tree and you just walk around the tree. You just keep walking around the tree all night, because if you settle down, you might freeze, and if you keep wandering, it'll just get worse. So this tree, you go around. So I wrote the poem. And then I remembered my friend Barry Lopez had just died. And I thought, I want to make this poem for Deborah Gwartney, his wife. So the second stanza then is thinking about Deborah. Lost in snow. When all day falling, the white sky fills every track back to the road for home. When turning, you see every tree is every tree by camouflage in their blank circumference. When no matter how you pivot, you can't find a path. When recognition dawns at dusk, you are lost for the night. There is nothing for it now. It's then you choose a hemlock or fir, a trunk with no low limb to impede your need, and with your left glove on the dim bark begin to circle your certain spindle, counting your stamped circuits of 100, 2, then 3, or counting breaths that puff more precious as cold deepens and the dark drifts close, knowing if you wander you are doomed, if you sleep you are gone, but tramping endless circles will convey you safe to sunrise. So by grief, you say his name softly to yourself as you orbit the vacant place he was, to be dizzy with it. You say his syllable through dark days, through changing moons, around and around in place, but not deeper into the dark wood where no one could find you. Oh, oh, my tree, plain companion, root and anchor.
That was Lost Snow, another poem from As the Sky Begins to Change by Kim Stafford out of Hen Press. And Kim, that brings up the topic of, which you're really interested in, of poems for practical use. So how do you think about that concept? Why should a poem be of practical use? And what do you mean when you say that?
Well, that's what I experience in my life. You have an anniversary coming up and you forgot to get a gift, make a poem. You have a friend in grief, make a poem for the friend. You've been asked to say a few words at a wedding, make a poem. I think poems prisoned in books need to return to direct encounter. The ritual, they provide a kind of ritual blessing for the relationships that are foundational to our life. And I have this list here. I'll just read a few. Besides submitting poems for publication, how might poems serve in the world? Have a poem in your pocket to recite at the mic when you're called to speak. Have a poem to read to a friend, a poem to post on a telephone pole, a poem to read at the city council meeting, the school board, a poem to be read as immigrants become citizens, a poem to be read in prison, in the hospital waiting room, at the homeless camp, a poem to offer to a young activist, a poem as preamble to a piece of legislation, a poem read at the dedication of a building, A poem to headline the website of a nonprofit agency you love. A poem to read in response to the question, what are you doing about racial justice, climate change, political divisions, economic inequality, war? A poem to read at a wedding, retirement party, gathering of veterans, AA meeting. It goes on and on. I want to have poems ready to take up that position when no one knows quite what to say.
Mm.
But we all need something to be said.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's been carefully constructed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just a wonderful way to put it. One of the things I always loved about Alan Fox, who founded Rattle, way back in the day, is he always has in his pocket. He wears those shirts with the pockets, and he has a poem he loved from the submissions that we went over, and he'll say, "Hey, give me a copy of that," and he'll take it and stuff it in his pocket, and then for the rest of the week he'll go around reading this poem that he really loved because he's a businessman. He's in real estate. He doesn't spend time with poets, but he'll just sort of like put these poems out there in the world with people that are just friends. And I've never met anybody else who does that. And we're supposed to love poems, but why don't we? If we love a great poem, why not, take a snapshot with your phone the next time you're with a friend? Hey, check this out. Listen to this. And there's some kind of, I don't know, there's an uncomfortableness with that. I think most people feel. And when I ask someone asks me what I do for a living on a plane, I say, "Oh, I'm the editor of a magazine." They're like, "What kind of magazine?" And I'm like, "Oh, poetry," and they don't know what to say. And there's this sort of awkwardness about poetry for reasons I don't really understand. But because of that, I think we don't do it. But why not? I guess is the thing that you're pointing out.
Well, I have a friend who every Wednesday on the main street of her town, she stands and hands out poems to people. And she, gets a variety of responses. But I have a whole thing. I give them a secret publishing. And, it says, go to the library, take a book you love and put your poem inside, put it back on the shelf, go to the Goodwill, put your poems in the pockets of all the coats. Leave a poem in the Xerox machine at work without your name. Just these ways to seed the world with poems.
Yeah, well, it'd be something just wonderful to do. Well, if anybody has any questions for Kim, please leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube. I'm paying attention to both. And I also should say, if you're enjoying this conversation and Kim's poems, please do click the like button. Leave reviews if you're listening later on, iTunes or Spotify or whatever you might be, because that really helps. Speaking of spreading poetry around, those things help the algorithms, which are in the modern world, in the digital age. A lot of the ways things spread are with algorithms. So clicking the like button, or hearting it, or leaving a comment, or sharing it, or whatever you can on social media, please do so. Let's hear another poem, Kim, and if anybody has any questions, leave them in the chat window. But Kim, let's hear something else.
Okay. Well, one thing I'm doing is I make a poetry postcard, and this is the largest card that will go for a postcard stamp. And so I can write an address, write a message, and then put a QR code on so people can hear the poem. So I'm trying to do everything at once, Tim. I've got the poem in print, I've got the access to the audio, and then I have a note. But I'll read this. It's called "How the Crow Knows Her Love." I think it's pretty early in the book. Let me find it. It's on page 26. And this is just, in the morning, the crows, they all live down in Finland in the parks. And then at dawn, they come flowing out in all directions, and they sit on the dead birch across from our house and talk to each other. So I was watching them, and I wrote this poem, How the Crow Knows Her. He has a way he dips his beak, a syncopated sing when he gives a tender shriek. I meet him in the shadows to tickle at his chin, to preen his glossy feathers till he shivers deep within. For I know behind his swagger he's a blooming fool for love. I can make him coo with pleasure as if he were a dove. I can make his vision blur, his eyes roll back and blink, and remind him of this later when I give a fetching wink. He makes me swoon with wonder when he flaps across the sun to bring me fragrant morsels, and I know that he's the one to raise our crowlets, teach them verve and zest, so they can swagger like him by the time they leave the nest. Oh, I can pick him from the flock, be they thousands in the trees. He makes my heart beat faster and go weak in wings and knees. When he glances past his shoulder to give that sassy look, I know I've got his number and read him like a rook. But how these humans find each other is an ancient mystery. For swarming in their flock lookalikes to me. No inky feet and feathers with rainbow hue to spy, the one who has that swagger that can always catch my eye. How they find their partner, nobody knows. It's a pleasure that's so easy.
And that was
Well, that was just fun to write.
yeah, you can hear the how much fun you had with that poem. That was How the Crow Knows Her Love by Kim Stafford. And and that poem had so much rhythm and cadence to it too. I mean, you think of Kim Stafford as a free verse poet, and yet you have a lot of that going on. There was a real rhythm of meter there in that poem. How much of your poems are driven by sound like that?
Quite a bit, but I try to get the rhymes too close enough to not sound like rhymes. Get them embedded in the middle of the line. People can look at a poem called Water Song that I just tried to get the word sounds as dense, flow, the language flowing like water. And I do a lot of formal things, and I have a superstition about getting stanzas of equal length.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to have the last word have a rhyme, a line or two ahead, above, so that that last word has a nice ring to it. A lot of tinkering to make things happen in a reader's mind, and they don't know why.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, really well said. Good explanation of how that works. One of the things you talked about in your afterword, which is just so interesting to this book, was that you should think like a philosopher and speak like a commoner rather than the other way around, which is really an interesting way to think about poetry. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, when we were talking earlier about teachers explaining what poems mean, Ted Kuser has this wonderful idea that critics and scholars need to advocate poems that require critics and scholars to explain them. So complex, dense, difficult poems get a privileged place in some anthologies and curricula. And Ted says, as for the rest of us, we can just talk to each other in poetry. And so I when I came across that line of Sir Philip Sidney back in the 16th century, think like a philosopher. So your thinking is complex, but your speaking is friendly to the listener. One thing I like to think is I write poems for people who don't read poetry. Oh, that's a poem? Oh, I didn't know a poem could be that simple and straightforward and just pleasant. But I put with that something Stephen Dunn said. I think in an interview you did, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind being called a simple or a poem easy to understand as long as I am serving complexity by simplicity. I'm seeking complexity, but the surface is apprehensible.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a constant struggle to make the poem more dense, more rich, but not at the expense of making it impenetrable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that goes along so well with how I think about good poetry, and whether or not, good poetry versus bad poetry, what a good poem actually is, what we mean when we say that. And to me, when I'm reading submissions, it feels like I'm just like being a truth detector. Like I'm listening for honesty and authenticity. And if I hear it, no matter how, there's so many ways you can speak a truth and speak authentically. But it's really hard to do. I mean, the truth about it is, there's people that think that there's no such thing as a bad poem. because it's always an expression of ourself. But the problem with that is that we're so rarely actually expressing ourselves. Like so many things, we're sort of recapitulating in the same way that like large language models, that AI for language is doing, is just parroting and just spitting out things that it's heard before, putting them in different forms, maybe syntactically, but nothing new is being created. And what we're trying to do with poetry is say something actually authentic, which even though we think that it's easy to say, I'm this or whatever, it's actually really hard to say something that's actually authentic. And to me, that's what a poem is actually doing, is just speaking a truth. And thinking that that's something that's easy to do is the mistake that so many people make. But that's what we're trying to do when we write poems.
Well, Tim, I don't know what you think about this, but and maybe I'm naive to think this, but in terms of poetry, I'm not worried about AI, because just what you're talking about is difficult, and it's original, and it's something I struggle with every single day. How can I say this? How can I truly discover something that I didn't know, that no one knew? I asked AI to write a poem. I wrote a poem about the dangers of AI. Then I asked AI to write a poem about the dangers of AI without rhyme. And AI delivered a poem that was unrhymed about halfway through, and then it just couldn't stand it, and it reverted to rhyme. And when I compared the two poems, I wasn't worried.
Yeah, I'm not worried at all either. At first I was. At first I thought that, I believed sort of the hype for a little bit. And thought that and I subscribed, I paid for ChatGPT, so I have the latest model. I try to use it for things like press releases to see what I could do with it. And it doesn't think. And there's actually a really big difference between generating text in a syntactical form that sounds right and copying things and stitching things together, and actually understanding things. Understanding creates, what it really is that we have all these different models. Like if you think about, there's that book by Stephen Hawking. I can't remember what it's called, but it talks about the way that each sort of field, from quantum mechanics to Newtonian physics, are all different sort of, you see little perspectives, like the parable of like feeling an elephant and like, oh, it's like a snake. Oh, it's a tree trunk. Oh, it's a wall. Yeah. And, they have these little angles. And the problem with AI is it only has the language angle. It doesn't have any sort of concept of an external reality. It doesn't have a three-dimensional model. It doesn't have imagery. It just has the ability to like replicate within this little structure, and that's not thinking at all. What we're really doing is taking things from one model, like one map, like with these like layers of maps. We're taking things from one map and like making it make sense in a different map, and that's what poets are doing. But it only has the language. And I'm not worried about AI at all, except for there are ways that it's going to be getting in the way of like industry, and things like that, because of what it can do, what it can fake, how well it can plagiarize. But it can't think. It can't make anything new. And when we sit down,
you're making me think, Tim, that in the coming world of AI, poetry will be even more important because it comes from one's heart and one's memory and one's anguish. And it's coming from an artesian source deep within the human being. So it's going to be very necessary.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe even more. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, we're running out of time because it's so fun to talk about all the things you like to talk about. But it feels to me that as we move forward into that world where the basic sort of structure of language can be generated really easily. Everything can be replicated, and we have so many ways of being entertained. There's so much superficiality everywhere. We can have all of our opinions really easily absorbed, so we're just sort of these walking drones of what we've heard. As we move through that world, and that world becomes more and more powerful and salient, the need for having individual thought and having actual perspectives is greater than ever. And so as we move forward into an AI world, in a world where, information is everywhere and there's too much of it is the problem, being able to create newness like a poet does becomes even more and more important. And, as a respite from all of the things that we're inundated with, to sit down and, focus in a meditative way about your life is something that becomes increasingly valuable. And so poetry, rather than being in danger, is like on the verge of flourishing in a way that it never has before, because we all need it more than we ever have before. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Oh, I think absolutely. My father said at one point, you can legislate freedom of speech, but you have to learn how to do it.
Hmm.
You have to learn how to, as you say, go to an original source within yourself rather than parroting back things you've heard, things you've been rewarded for doing things in a certain way. That may be dangerous. You need to go to something that you haven't done, that you're not good at, that you struggle to create. And I think of a little poem, not by me, but by a student. And I want to say to our listeners, this is often what I say to a group. I'm going to give you some optional homework. And that is, think of someone in your life who needs a poem, and then make a poem for that person. AI is not going to do it. This is coming from you for a particular person. So the example I want to give is a poem written by a fourth grader at a little school in Oregon. I gave this invitation, think of someone who needs a poem. So he wrote a poem for his friend Max. So this poem is called Max. There are 7 oceans to cross. There are 7 continents. There are 50 states. There are 192 countries. There are billions of stars. And I met you.
Hmm. Oh, that's sweet. That really is.
Yeah, and that's a very useful poem. That's a sweet thing from one person to another. And fundamentally, that's what, you know, um, our son said when he was about 10 years old, he said, Dad, we didn't become human when we invented tools, because when you use a tool, you just look at the tool. We became human when we looked across the fire into each other's eyes and told stories. And I think that's what we do with a poem. We look across the fire into each other's eyes and tell a story.
Yeah, really well said. And that's so fundamental to being, human, that we'll never, the less we have of it based on the way our lives live, the more we crave it and the more we need it. And so I think that's why poetry will keep flourishing as we move through, this rapid advancement like we've never seen before as a species. There were some questions I want to make sure I pass along.
Okay.
So Amy Miller, who's a wonderful poet that we know and publish
Yeah.
frequently, she says, could you talk about your time as Oregon Poet Laureate? Did you have certain goals, and what were the challenges? Because I'm always interested in that. And, how to spread poetry and what worked, but what didn't too. And what were the challenges for you as well?
Yeah. Um, well, one challenge was to think I know what I was doing. I've been doing poetry for a long time. Shouldn't I be able to just go into a class and teach or give a reading? But every community had a different ecosystem. And the challenge was to try to psych that out and figure out how could I meet this community in a way that doesn't feel like, oh, the teacher is coming to tell us about poetry. How could I be part of what's already happening? So, for example, I was in the town of Madras, and when I got there, the poster in great big letters, it said free pizza. And then in little letters, it said poetry reading. There were 60 people there, and we had a wonderful time. And one of the young people said afterward, "Oh, I see how it is. It's kind of like church. All the old people, there's a verse, and then everybody goes, oh, like, oh man." So to try to get into the culture of that place, or to go into visit a prison, and how does it work here? It's not going to be a famous poem. It's not going to cut it. It's got to be a poem for this place.
Hmm.
So, I would write a poem for the inmates at the Two Rivers Prison
Hmm.
and give copies out. When I go to a winery, what poems would fit between the courses of wine? So to try to fit poetry into the existing fabric of a place, that was the challenge. I don't know if that's an answer, Amy, but That's some of what I learned.
No, I think so, for sure. There's a question. PMB wanted to know if you've ever read at Rose City Book Club. There's a great open mic there, and maybe part of promo. But the question is too. Where do you think the best place to share poems is? I know you want to share them as widely as possible, but what do you think the best use of your time? Like, we only have so many hours in the day. Like, should we be focusing on readings like that at the Rose City Book Club, or should we be focusing on sharing poems on social media? Should we make books? Is there a best way to do it?
I don't think there is a best way. So let's do as many ways as we can. I was asked to read a poem to open the legislative session in Salem. And one of the senators said, "We are divided. Read a poem that will bring us together." So that was the poem for there. When I sat with the veterans, how can we bring forth our dark secrets for those we love that we've been sheltering, we've been hiding all our lives. That's a completely different setting, and there's no one size fits all. There's no best way. I think every place has its own need, and every place may benefit from a very distinctive approach.
Yeah, well said for sure. And I just, I love all the ways that you do it. I mean, I think we have to. And it's worth doing, and that's the future of poetry too. We're over time, really. Do you want to finish out with one last poem?
Yeah, and before I do, I want to say one thing about Rattle. I've always loved the name of the magazine because I feel like we're in Neanderthal times, and there's a rhythmic rattle going along with a poem, and it's just making us all feel that we're close together.
Well, it's so funny
I want
you
to
say
read
that.
the
I don't know if I've
poem.
ever mentioned, when I first started with Rattle, we had no logo. It just said Rattle, Poetry for the 21st Century. So I asked Alan and Stella Sue, who was the editor at the time, what Rattle was. And I was like, thinking about a logo, how could we make something that shows what we do, or and is it like a rattlesnake? Is it like a baby rattle? And we were sort of talking it's not any of that. We don't know what it is. And I started to think about it as the way a poem makes you feel. Like a poem rattles around inside of you, and that's what it does. It keeps rattling this movement that doesn't stop after you've read it. And I think that's why I think it's a great name. And I think that's what, your poems do, and that's what poetry does in general. So I really love that.
It's a great name. Yeah. Okay, so this poem is on page 122. It's called Schooling Sorrow. And it's just, one use for poetry to me is to explore an idea. How can sorrow be useful? I have a thing I tell my students: the poet experiences tropism toward the difficult. The way a leaf turns toward light, the poet turns toward the difficult thing and tries through some kind of alchemy to turn it into something healing, something helpful. So schooling sorrow. When sorrow's young, it's pure. Stunned pang at breakup, betrayal, failure, death. You weep, rant, brood, slump, and then, in the morning, sorrow starts its epic journey into memory, becomes an island in your archipelago of sufferings. Then, if you are strong and lucky to have a listener, you begin to apprehend its quirks, to tell it, shape it, watch it grow into a story. And if you tell your story well, with curiosity and courage, it then becomes a possession, and in time, a treasure, a smudge of wisdom. This can be your gift, your offering. But if you don't school your sorrow into story, it can never be your friend.
No, it's a beautiful way. I love that metaphor too. That was schooling sorrow from As the Sky Begins to Change. But I love that idea of poets, growing, moving toward the light. That's a really cool metaphor for what poets try to do and what to try to do with your own poems. So, yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much for being a guest again, Kim. Always so much fun talking to you, and congratulations on the new book from Hen Press. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tim. I love being with you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
That was Kim Stafford once again. His newest book is As the Sky Begins to Change, just out from Hen Press. You can find all of Kim's work at his website, which is kimstaffordpoet.com. That's also where you can find his Instagram, instagram.com/KimStaffordPoet. Makes it really, Kim Stafford Poetry. So find that on Instagram for a new poem and a whole bunch more every day. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. The prompt for this week was to write a poem. Wait, that's not right. That was an old one. Let me see. Let me look it up again. The prompt for this week was to... I put it in, I just didn't update it. The prompt for this week was to... Did I not save it? Okay, so let's cut this off for a second. The prompt for this week was to... I have it down over here. Write a poem with a single word as the title in which our understanding of that word shifts by the end of the poem. So write a poem with a single word as a title in which our understanding of that word shifts by the end of the poem. Now, all the rest of this is right. So to share a poem, 1 page max, email your poem to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines@rattle.com. Then find the Zoom link in the chat windows on YouTube or Facebook. I'm about to deploy them here on YouTube and Facebook. So join us there, but only if you'd like to share a poem. If you'd like to just sit back and watch and enjoy the poetry, it's still rolling right where you are on YouTube and Facebook, so sit tight right where you are. I'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. I had to jump back and go into Photoshop and make the slide because I wanted to make sure everybody knew that it's a 1 page max. The slide said 2, But we switched to a one-page max to keep the poetry rolling because we love poetry. We want to make sure that we get to as much as possible.
Speaking of which, I've just realized I don't have an earphone, which is important to this, because I do want to hear everyone's poems.
Yeah.
So sorry about that.
There is way too much to do.
There is. It's
So
true.
I'm going to plug you in.
Meanwhile, let me say how much I enjoyed listening to you talk to Kim Stafford. I thought that was fascinating. I love how much he shares his poems on Instagram and everywhere. So I particularly was like, I was in the other room like, yeah, that's right, Kim Stafford. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I do love all the things he does, and his perspective on it is so good because we do need to change the way we think about sharing and publishing poetry, and creating poetry and what it means. And so I love talking to Kim. Really fun a couple of years ago, and fun again. It's fun to see how the book came out too.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so the prompt, like we said for this week, was to write a poem with a single word as the title, in which our understanding of that word shifts by the end of the poem. So what did you come up with, Katie?
Well, I had to be somewhat ornery and pick the word title to go ahead and have shift by the end of the poem. So that's the word I went with. And yeah, I'm ready to read it. It is not an American sonnet. It is not a haibin. I know everybody who listens normally is shocked by that fact, but it's an actual just free verse poem.
Well, mine is a haibin.
Thank God.
So we have the haibins covered. But,
Okay, good.
Okay.
Title. First, you notice the lack of an un here, which hits me like a white wisp without the ability to quite commit to a color in a cloud. Seedless pine cones clinging to your throat, bitter. I've never had a title, at least the kind worthy of engraving on a placard on my desk, to click my nails upon, to chance running my fingers along when the two empty chairs I spent my life facing weren't full of butts or can'ts rattling their canes. But a title is more than a name. Take abstract art. That moment where, staring up at a canvas with pools of neon paint and scraps of balled-up newspaper piled on top, the little boats no one asked for, the QR code artist only offers a shrug. I lost it on my phone. Untitled. The impossible doublespeak of nameless art. When, from the start, a title demands the steam to iron out our creases. And just when we can no longer read them, the last one right on top. Scratched in stone if we're lucky, but far better written in art.
Yeah, I love that. I love you finally got your, speaking of Andy Rooney rant, you got your one in about how much, because we go to art galleries a lot. We love, anytime we go to a city, we see its local art gallery. Cincinnati with Dick Westheimer had a really nice one.
It did.
The Off the Beaten Path one. But we always, it's like, why not? Why not title?
Give me a title, please. Give me an entry into your really weird, cool art that I want to experience. I want the entry points.
Well, it goes along with what Kim was talking about with his introductions. And it is really interesting. If you listen to his audiobook, he does it like a reading. And that's kind of what the title is. It's like a little bit of a setup, and if you have more, it's even better to work with. But why not?
Why not? Exactly.
Untitled is the worst, especially in modern art, when it's like a blue wall and then it's like Untitled number 37.
Yeah, you figure it out.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Well, mine, so as you might have known from last week, Katie and I are doing a haibin crown, which is really fun. So we're taking every day this month, we're taking the haiku from the person's yesterday's haibin, and we're turning that into the prose part of today's haibin. And so Katie's haiku, a really wonderful haiku, was this right here. It was steam train whispers in your ear.
Monoku.
A monoku. That was the haiku, and then I'm taking each word of there and making it in a little prose section, and then adding my own haiku. So we're going through that way like you would with a crown of sonnets or something. And here was mine, following the prompt too, because I thought maybe one would come up naturally this week, and it almost did, but then there were two words, and so I had to do a different one. This was tracks, and this is today's haiku in my crown. Tracks. Steam whispers from the electric kettle. The last of the snow melts from the cherry blossoms. In a branch, a dark-eyed junco calls and calls to your ear the whole of its three-note album, training you not to listen. The hours, a line of boxcars, empty or full. So that was today's Hyben. Katie's got to write a prose section. Maybe she'll think of it as we go. But you've seen those words, the hour is a line of boxcars, empty or full.
I'm excited. I really am enjoying this so much. I'm like, damn, it's your poem up. I got to look at it. I got to start thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun to do. And so, the way tracks moves and that satisfies, I believe,
it definitely
the prompt for
does.
this week.
Yeah.
So let's see what everybody else has. And first in line is Nate Jacob. Hey, Nate, how you doing?
Yes, this is a big moment for me, guys.
It is. This is like the equivalent of like winning the Super Bowl. You going to Disneyland next
Basically
week?
the
I mean,
same
I've
thing.
got very little left to live for now, so that's all right. I'll live with
I don't
this.
know where. I think Dick might have. Dick. I think he probably waited.
I don't know how I did it, but I'll take it. Hey, I wrote a silly poem this week.
Well, we love silly.
Yay!
In fact, at the end of the poem, I just tell you the new meaning.
That is one
If you
way
don't want
to
to
do
hear
it.
me out, just go ahead and read the last line, and it'll be all over soon enough.
Okay, well, let's hear it, Nate.
Pain. What started as a twitch somewhere north of my foot took a hard right past stitch, and the pain left me kaput. Had the mayo gone bad? Was the meat too salty? Was the avocado spread the thing that was faulty? I was dying of the pains, saying goodbye to my loves, and hello to the saints who hang out up above. If this was my last meal, I'd chosen very wrong. Doubled over, loud squeal, sweaty brow, won't be long. Curse you, celiac witches. Why must I lose my head in presence of sandwiches? Pain is French for bread. So dumb.
That is really funny, Nate.
Yeah.
My
that's
apologies,
great.
Poetry World.
And I think that ending is just perfect. Actually, it really is.
I don't know how giving a spoiler made the end more enjoyable, but somehow it did, Nate.
It's
Well,
just because you're
there you
waiting
go.
for it to come. It
I
was
know.
like
I gotta
it was a
lower
cliffhanger.
expectations anytime it's possible.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for
Thanks a
sharing that,
lot.
Nate. Yeah, you definitely made my night with that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
All right. That was Nate Jacob with Pain. Okay. Way to kick it off. Okay, now Susan Spear is up next. I believe a first-time caller, if I remember right.
Yes, that's correct. And I have a big confession.
Uh-huh.
The poem that I sent you, I thought was for last week for the rhyme.
Oh,
I
well, that's
didn't
okay.
read
That's a great segue into saying... Uh-huh.
But I think it fits.
Oh, that's great.
Yay.
Well, that is a perfect segue, because I always forget to say it doesn't have to be about today's prompt. It could be
Yeah.
any prompt ever.
Yeah.
That's our rule for the
Okay.
prompt line. So it's great, even last week's, but that it works for this week is cool, too.
Yeah, that's neat.
Double the cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it fits. The prompt for last week, if you don't all remember, was rhyme, inline rhyme in every line. And then this week, the one-word title with a new twist. So I think it fits.
I think,
Right?
yeah, glancing at it, I think it does, too. So it's going to be fun.
Lunch. The freshly widowed man stares out his window across the alley to a plot of earth overrun by thistles and a dearth of care. Now every day he's over there, digging, weeding, turning, seeding the dirt. After Mother's Day, in early May, he's on his knees in soil planting peas, lettuce, and tomatoes. He broods over those heirlooms with their tiny yellow blooms. Soon the roots poke flowers into fruit. In his straw hat, he studies the garden patch and picks the ripe tomatoes, leaving those that aren't quite ready. He stands tall in threadbare overalls and reaches over each neighbor's wooden fence. Without pretense, he leaves a clutch of veggies for their lunch. His neighbors savor the commingled flavor, hints of earth, sun, maple leaf, and grease.
Oh, beautiful poem. I love the way that moves. Thanks so much for sharing that, Susan.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
so much. I love the rhyme. It's very, very well done.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't know if you watched last week when everybody was sharing it, but it was so fun to have that internal rhyme. Like, it
Yeah.
makes the poem so much more musical.
Yeah.
And that was the case there, too. I forgot to ask, Susan, where are you calling from?
I live in Tampa. So I lived 45 years in Denver, but we recently moved down to Tampa when we retired.
Yeah, well, great. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, and I hope you join again soon.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks so much. Yeah, that was Susan Delaney Spear with Lunch. Next up, let's go to Mary Keating.
I'm getting better at this. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah. How you doing
Hi.
today?
Good. So I have a reference in my poem to a poem called Strictly Germ Proof. I don't know if you know that poem, but it has a lot of big words like the antiseptic baby and the prophylactic pup. So this is poetry in honor of poetry.
Oh, okay.
My mother had us memorizing poetry like Giederman's Strictly Germ Proof before we could read, twisting our tongues to follow her lead as words scattered throughout college tomes escaped from our grammar school mouths. We belted the lyrics while hamming up parts from Man of La Mancha, My Fair Lady, and Camelot, blasted their songs on Dad's hi-fi until rhythm and rhyme seeped deep inside my veins with their pulsating sounds. Poetry became another sister to hang out with in high school, helped me express my feelings to budding boyfriends, memorialize ardent breakups, hug grieving classmates and family when somebody died before blooming. Immersed in verse all my life, I never thought myself a poet, no MFA for validation, just entranced by words and finding the right combination to transform the world, few hardships and slant to survive. Somewhere, there grows a cathedral of poet trees. If you call and I don't answer, come find me there.
Oh, really creative. Yeah, I love that. Poetry.
Me
Yeah,
too.
thanks.
The ending is really nice. And it might relate somewhat to the prompt later on.
Oh.
Might relate.
I don't remember what the prompt is.
Well,
so.
then it might for you also.
Well, thanks
Can't
so
wait
much.
to find out. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks so much, Mary. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. That was Mary Keating with poetry. Just let me do this too. There. Next up, let's go to Bishwajit Mishra, who is early in line. He likes to linger late, but today
Fashionably late.
he's jumping in.
Good evening, Katie and Tim.
Yeah, hey, Biz, how you
Hi.
doing?
I'm good, thanks. So, how are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're great. Yeah, it's a great night of poetry. What do you got for us?
Great indeed. Great interview. Great poetry. And we love people who share like that.
We
know
do.
that.
Bishwajit, you share so many haiku. I am spoiled on X. Yeah.
It is true. Everybody should go to X, the new Twitter, and follow Bishwajit Mishra because he's got great haiga all the time.
I should also say that he is going to be in the 2024 One Art Haiku Anthology coming out tomorrow, as are a few of the people in the open lines tonight.
That's true. Yeah, it's a wonderful anthology Katie's doing. Do you want to say that now? Tell her what
I guess I should talk
about.
about it now since we're talking about it. But I'm super excited about it in part because one of the big goals that I had with this is to allow previously put poems on social media to actually incorporate them into the anthology, in part to show that, it just makes it better that, you may have posted this poem before. So I'm super excited for it to be live tomorrow morning. And it's going to be great. I love the poems in it too. The haiku are incredible. I'm super excited to just have the excuse to read it for the 50th time.
Yeah, and that's
We're all excited, Kitty.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so you can find that, of course, at I'll put it on the screen right here at One Art, a journal of poetry. We already.
You can also subscribe to
You
them.
can subscribe.
Yes.
But if you go here, tomorrow, that 2024 haiku anthology is going to be a live link.
Yeah.
Right now, it probably says forthcoming. Are we going to have it? Nope, forthcoming.
Yep.
On National Haiku Day. So
Yes.
Bishwajit Mishra. Who else do we know is
Oh
in that?
gosh, Nancy Tennell, Mary Keating. There's so many people that submitted really wonderful haiku that are also Radlers, which is really exciting to get to include them. Dick Westheimer. I mean, I could just go on. I'm afraid to name names because I don't want to forget one person that wrote the most amazing haiku. But Bishwajit is among them, of course, and I love yours in particular, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, I do too. That was
Yeah,
one of
I
the
read
ones
it to
Katie
you. I
recommended.
read the submission. I'm like, Tim, you've got to hear this.
Yeah, really fun one. One of the most fun, I'd say. in
Yeah,
the
really it
anthology.
is. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Always
So,
pleasure.
yeah, to find that, I should say oneartpoetry.com tomorrow. Yeah.
We are
Anyway,
community people. We like to share.
we
live
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
Okay.
so what do you have for us, Biz?
We have rice. I have rice.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I have rice in letters.
Not like in front of you for dinner. Okay.
Okay. Okay, here I go. Rice. Soon it'll be time to plant the seeds after they till the fields in hot summer. Then pray they get rain. Right. Not too much, not too little, not too soon, not too late. Rain that is not a sneeze nor a diarrhea. Then uprooting the saplings, then plowing again, and then planting the saplings back, and hoping the sun, the rain, everything is going to be the right friend. And then, when the harvest comes, the festivals are already elbowing each other in the wings. So are the weddings, as the bank interest and the loans. Rains drench everything but the clouds, and the mud and the paddy take turns in filling someone with one and the other with the other. Although my story is as old as me, but I have only one set of eyes to see with, and one brain for memory to grow in. I can hear the garage door opening. My wife's voice comes in. Are you cooking rice? I say, yes, but why? She says, it fills the whole house. The smell. I was wondering if to eat roti for dinner today.
That's great. Love that turn at the end, Biz. Thanks so
Yeah.
much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yep, you too.
We are having rice later also.
Are we?
Oh,
We
good,
are,
good.
actually.
I'm making some risotto, yeah.
But it
Is
does
on the
fill
stove?
the
Is it
house,
in
right?
Danger? Okay.
When it's being cooked, it does. The smell fills the whole house, right?
Yeah, get ready
Especially
for it,
winter,
Tim.
where everything is closed.
Yep.
Well, I can't wait. I am getting hungry already. Thanks.
Hey, good night, guys.
Yeah, have a good night.
Night.
That was Biz Mishra with Rice. Wonderful poem. Next in line is Mike Bales.
I didn't see a blue button. I just hit the unmute thing.
I got you. Well, good to see you, Mike. How you
Hi.
doing?
Oh yeah, pretty good. Get to go back to college days. Kim Stafford said do an introduction, so I'm doing an introduction.
Well, it is good advice.
This
Yeah.
this was said in Iowa State when I was friends with graduate students in psychology, and their office was in the second oldest building on the campus. Then the building was called Old Botany, which actually I do have a poem called Old Botany. But this poem's called Psychology. I walked down the hallway, a maze of panels painted in luminescent colors of oranges and greens, as if I were seeking a morsel of food or a sip of sugar water. That day, I wanted to talk with my instructor of developmental psychology, a graduate student, about the class while I knew I wanted us to be friends. And when we met, we mostly talked about our lives. While a handwritten sign on the desk of my instructor for intro said she was gone for the day, she couldn't cope. Down the hallway, the door to the office of the facilitator of my therapy group was locked. She told us during one session that she put her time with her husband on hold while she was working on her doctorate. And that was what people sometimes had to do. Taped to a wall was a sign where people could a sheet where people could sign up for an experiment where someone would measure how often a subject's eyes would blink when the subject was asked questions. Extra credit was offered. I asked about another friend, and someone said she was off somewhere throwing a frisbee, taking a break. The building shadowed the north end of the grassy central campus, where students sat together during lunch. I stepped outside and listened as the building breathed.
Oh, that's great, Mike. I love that. It takes me back to doing those psychology studies myself. I remember a lot of times they'd pay you like $20 or something.
I never got paid. What the heck?
They didn't do that at Florida State?
They didn't pay us. They made us take it as a psychology minor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, they'd to do those studies, and then you'd sit there and you'd do whatever they wanted you to do, and they give you $20 to go eat lunch.
I'd
or
always
dinner.
be trying to figure out what they were testing.
We didn't get paid. We got extra credit and generally did pretty well in psychology. So generally it didn't do the extra credit. It was doing it for the fun of it.
Well, that sounds fun. Really fun poem, Mike. Thanks for that. It really takes me back. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Take care. There's Mike Bales with psychology. And next, Brian O'Sullivan is here.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Katie.
Hey, Brian. Yeah, great to see you kind of in the dark there in the movie theater.
Yeah, I know. It kind of looks like Blair Witch Project or something. Sorry about that.
Just don't start like crying with one tear. That movie terrified
I think
me.
is actually happening. You said maybe the poem. I don't know.
Brian is also in the One Art anthology coming out tomorrow with the poem that first appeared, I think, you reading it on the prompt lines and a haiku that I love and is one of the funniest in the anthology. So I'm looking forward to reading it again tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great stuff, Brian. And Brian is in the Guzzle issue too that I'm putting together.
House Brian's everywhere.
I know, and it's so fun. I was looking through it, and you were too, as I was proofreading and looking over the copy editing and stuff. And so many people from the Rattlecast are in that section. It's so fun. Like it's like Nate Jacob and then Cindy Gore.
Yeah, I know. I'm really excited about the Guzzle issue.
I know, and it's just so fun. I was thinking about that a lot with Kim Stafford because what we're doing is all learning how to share poems and dig deper and all gathered around like that and
doing it together.
It's enacting what Kim Stafford's trying to do too.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Brian, sorry to let's hear what you've got for us this week.
Yeah. So it's weird. It's kind of like a golden shovel, except that the quote comes near the end instead of as an epigraph, because otherwise it wouldn't help to change the meaning of the word, as I was trying to do.
Nice.
And it's sort of set in high school. Passive. The passive voice must not be used. Brother Powers boomed, smirking, and he looked to see which of our faces showed that we got it and were suitably impressed. He was showing us what high school English had deemed necessary to that forceful writing that bends others' minds to ours. But when we switched from comp to lit, we heard otherwise. Nor less I deem that there are powers which of themselves our minds impress, that we can feed this mind of ours in a wise passiveness. Wordsworth's right, but those powers that feed us come from someone. Remember that our minds are vessels. Only be passive when you're listening to him, said brother, more or less. But now, I think that it's to hear the powers within ourselves that we must yield to passive voice when we can.
The note too, Brian?
Oh, yeah, the note, because I was afraid I was plagiarizing. No, Brother Powers may have been quoting William Sapphire's Self-Contradictory Rules for Writers, published in the New York Times, 1979. He has one of them says something very close to what I remember this brother saying. His real name isn't Powers, of course. I think Sapphire says the passive voice should never be used.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that, Brian. Yeah, really cool poem.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, take care. It was Brian O'Sullivan with Passive, their one-word title poem where the meaning of the word transforms.
It did.
In the process of the poem, it did. Next up is Chelsea McClellan.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hey, Chelsea, great to see you.
Good to be here as always.
So what have you got for us?
So this poem comes from a conversation I had with my therapist, my craniosacral therapist, who was gently touching me as they do and said, just so you know, I did believe you before, but in case you were curious, you are not just lazy. Your vagus nerve is very messed up. I forget exactly how she said it. So this is Vegas.
Interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Vegas. I've never been, but I've heard the tune. A hummingbird stopped by to sing it. Its vibrant yellow greens whirred the blues into my ears. I blushed and had to turn away. Too loud, too exciting for this barefoot orchard dweller. This bench, a kayak on the dandelion sea that I keep meaning to, imagining that tomorrow I'll feed enough calcium to the earth to dry it up, to find solid ground for my children to run on. A strap for these boots that keep falling off. Meantime, I take another dip into the yellow weeds. Open my ears to hear the wind stirring up my therapist's voice. It's okay to swim, as long as you do not stop swimming. Do not begrudge your body. A sea cannot evaporate overnight. Your vagus nerve is not okay.
Yeah, very interesting. Powerful poem,
Mm-hmm.
as you tend to have, Chelsea. Thanks so much for sharing that.
I really, in particular, love how immediate the entry is into your poem. It's like you dive right into it and want to keep reading it.
Yeah, definitely. Great work.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care. Yeah, there was Chelsea McKellen with Vegas. And next, finally, who, I don't know how long you waited, Dick, but you're here now. How you doing tonight?
I actually I was not going for a cup of tea, but a friend called me right at the end of the other piece to tell me seriously how much his life was changed by seeing the eclipse.
Oh, wow. Well, thanks I thought we were done rubbing it in. But...
Maybe they can call us after and tell us.
Well, I was telling him about I said, did you read Sunday's poem? I said, no, your life was not changed. So anyway, I was late for two reasons. He's a good poet friend.
Uh-huh.
So it's interesting how different folks did this word changing thing.
Yeah.
And I really admired how it worked in your poem, Tim, that the word, I don't believe, appeared in the poem, except as,
Yeah.
And I'm sort of, that was a magic trick.
He's capable of much magic with poetry, I've found.
I'm gonna have to try that, man. I mean, all poetry is a magic trick, but that was a interesting one. So I've got a short little one here called Spring.
Great, yeah, let's hear it.
Spring beauties are confetti cast on the forest floor. There I bend and thumb one small blossom, 5 rose pink petals soft as shrews' ears. I spy my wife in the nearby glen bent low. I know she examines this same thing we've each seen woven with the season. The escapement in the watch of me springs. My gears strip and spin as I swoon and consider all the ways the world loves its constant making.
Oh, love that ending for sure. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Dick.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.
Yeah, it was Dick Westheimer with Spring, and another, from that perspective of somebody who has so much of a connection with the earth. Really cool poem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, next up, let's go to Siobhan Brownlee. Oh, we were
supposed
late.
to do her first.
We were
It's so late.
first.
She's in France.
Hey, Siobhan, I'm sorry.
Je suis désolée. That's my attempt.
Oh, thank you, Katie.
Well, how you doing this early morning?
I'm fine, perfectly fine. Good. So just some background about this poem. I am co-teaching a module on climate change, and it's a virtual exchange. So I've got students in both South Africa and France, and the students appear in the poem. It is a series of haiku. You were talking about haiku before,
nice.
Following the 575 syllable pattern. And I'm going through different countries in the world where there have been floods. The title of the poem is Floods. I start off with my birth country, New Zealand. And my worry with the poem is at the very end, whether it was clear or not. And I think I'm a bit like Tim as well. The word floods only appears in the title.
Nice.
So
Yeah, good job.
Great.
So here goes. In one day pelts down an entire summer's worth of rain, a kiwi bird screeches. Baked, cracked, desert land, gushers drown geckos, possums, kangaroo joeys. Jasmine rice wafting, scooters in Hanoi are ploughing through watery ways. Phone outages, Katrina and other phantoms shelter in a dome. The River Mersey is groaning and bursts its banks. I am encroached on. My students typing, ample chat spatters the screen, optimistic green. Louis tells us about rescues in rubber dinghies, a for sale sign. C4 affirms that AI can prevent disaster. A surge raises shacks. Cow's eyes are immersed, expansive brown monsoon lakes are landsliding me. My whoosh of words sinks debris of naive dreams. The young people stare.
Oh, I love that ending, especially. Yeah, another
whoosh
great
of words,
ending.
yeah.
For sure, that was floods, and it's interesting because you could add another one. I don't know if you saw as I was switching over the to Rattle's like YouTube or Twitter thing, so I could stream this on Twitter. I saw the current footage of the Dubai airport. It's like a lake. It's really interesting to see and a little frightening. So you can maybe add an extra one. But that is a wonderful haiku sequence. Thanks for sharing that, Siobhan.
Yes, I suppose I could have taken many countries. It was countries I have associations with that I chose. But my worry about the ending was I kind of find my students a bit over optimistic, and I'm coming in with a torrent of more negative discourse. I don't know whether people understood it, but I think it's always a worry that if it's something's too obscure, or the opposite, if it's too obvious. So to get that middle path.
Yeah, well,
Anyway.
there's so many lines to walk.
Yeah.
From you have to let people leap a little bit, and you have to have optimism while also facing reality too. There's just so much balance in the whole
Yeah,
of everything,
there is.
including poetry.
So many of my edits are trying desperately to claw that balance into my own poem, so I understand.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Good night. Yeah, that was Siobhan Brownlee with Floods. And next, let's go to Danica.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, I just discovered you guys in January, and I've been
right.
gobbling up episodes. I started from the beginning episode.
Oh
and
my
I've been
gosh.
gobbling it up, and I love prompts, but I can never finish them in time. This is the confluence of some stars aligning that I actually got to be here live and have something, although it's old. Okay, so last month I didn't finish the What to Do If poem. And I didn't finish it until last week, got the prompt to do the internal rhyme. So I combined them.
Oh,
great,
nice.
The only way I'm going to catch up is if I start combining 2 or 3
good
of the
strategy.
prompts all at the
Great.
same time. Well, I got it from you, Katie. You were like, you said something about people combining them, and I thought, that's what I'll do. So
Oh, that's great.
I live in rural Hawaii, and we have a wild chicken problem.
Oh, wow.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
It is.
So I have a lot of poems about chickens. Okay. So this is what to do if a wild rooster sets up camp in the neighbor's pasture. And I think I cheated somewhere. I'm the student who never does what they're told to do anyway, but there's some cheating in here somewhere. I am a pacifist by nature, middle child mediator, a lack of arsenal, weapons training, maintaining multiple counts daily of where the hens play in the yard. Self-taught coop builder, chick magnet, COVID habit, feather cuddler, dry worm dispenser, form of a waterfall. All accounted for +1. There's a rooster come to call. From across the road, loosed from the cock farm, and so full of himself. Here in the wet green of Puna, the wild chickens roam. I say, come home, get some dinner. Don't be afraid. Catch 'em in the coop to coax them to lay within reach. Each named, semi-tamed, pellets at sunrise and papaya skins at 8. But wild roosters, not only loud, are indiscriminate. Will fuck any dumb cluck, and soon there are chicks in the yard, and it's hard to watch but hope they get snatched by mongoose or hawk. Problem is, he won't quit, and the more he begets, up go the odds of more roosters, more chicks. My neighbor tells us he has a gun used on wild hogs and rabid dogs and now aimed at taking this cock down. I say wait until I'm not home. I sing to my girls, what a world, what a world. It's the cycle of life, Maisie, my favorite hen. And then it's dead, one bullet in the head. I pet its pelt, soft dark rainbow drying in the shed.
So much fun with that poem.
Yeah,
Thanks so much
so
for sharing.
Oh, I
interesting.
had so much fun.
Wow. Well, great job combining prompts, double duty, star student on your first appearance.
At least the dead rooster could be put to some
To use. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. I'm so glad you could be here. I hope you come back soon.
Oh, I will. I love you guys.
Oh, great.
I'm
thanks
telling
so
all my
much.
friends to tune in.
Oh, that's
Great.
great. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Danica Dinsmore from Hawaii sharing that poem. And really interesting. The root. I heard about the pig problem. Isn't it like a
Not
wild?
about the chickens.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm envious because I do want to have my own chickens, to be honest. But that's
Yeah, well, Greg Jones does. It's interesting.
Okay,
we should
good.
check out.
We
his
should
house.
look
Anyway.
at the chickens.
Next up is Janthi Rangan. Hey, Janthi, are you there? Gotta unmute. Still muted. There you go. Hello.
Hi, Tim. Hi,
Hi.
Katie.
Hi. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. So this is a very short poem. It's called Artichokes. The stuffed vegetable made me drool. Every petal facelifted with trims of parmesan, garlic, herbs, and olive oil. I photographed the dish many times and brought my plate closer to enjoy. I didn't know the gustatory protocol. To pluck the leaves one by one, hold them between incisors and pull, and pile the leftovers like mussel shells. I chewed on the hard, unbloomed corolla and knew it wasn't a delicacy. Never could be. It was just a hearty choke.
That's a great ending. Artichoke. I always wondered what the etymology of that word was. Artichoke.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The choke of that. Like, I actually really like. In culinary school, they call it turning artichokes. I find it really fun. If you mess it up, you get like stuck by the artichoke. But if you do it well, it feels like an art form.
Turning artichokes?
I'll have to show you one time.
Okay. I have no idea what you're talking about. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Janthi. Yeah, and
Thank
you got
you.
a little homework assignment for me,
Yeah.
learning what the heck Katie's talking about.
Yeah, after our wonderful poem about fiddle ferns too. Like, I always want to eat after.
Oh, that's right. I forgot the fiddle ferns.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, and the rice tonight.
I know it's a lot of
Yeah,
food.
I'm
We're
getting
just super
hungry
hungry.
already. Okay. Next up, let's go to Mark Grenier.
Hi, Tim and Katie. How's it going?
Hey, great. Good to see you, Mark.
Okay. As usual, I made an attempt at the prompt, but I probably cheated a little bit. So here it goes.
Well, as long as a poem comes of it, we don't care. It's
Yeah.
a good opportunity to say that.
Honor system there.
Yep.
Okay. It's called Pray. Keep me safe, O Lord, I pray, from predatory thoughts that eat all signs of peace from the Holy Land, that prey on the banks of Jordan's stream, where holiness preachers say rose from death on the third dry day. Rolled the stone away from his tomb store into a despairing spring, where cowering disciples knelt like prey until the Pentecost came in flames, felled them into a new face covenant, prayers of faith in a new pantheon, which come like a herd of prey to them, sent from above, which left them speaking in tongues, inspired to proselytize, propagate their faith in all the land. Christianity took from those who called them home, who prayed to other gods, became helpless prey, struck down by the axe of faith, laid low by missionary hands, wielding words like weapons, backed by better weapons, made to end the lives of prey, beheaded those who were perfectly happy, praying to other gods, preying on other nations in conflicts more or less vast than religious wars are wont to be, as Israel's now seems to be, remembering the Holocaust when they were once prey to a heedless Christian state, intent on revenge for imagined wrong loss, for their defeat at the hands of imagined Jewish elites. Lower races rejecting Christ, preying on Christians, good common folk, living their lives in imagined peace, protected from all those evil birds of prey that live by attacking others from the sky, destroying all below as their leaders pray, recalling the darkness brought to prey, who cower beneath unfettered attacks from above, down on their quaking knees, mere prey they pray.
Yeah, great. I love that way pray becomes a refrain in that poem. Yeah, so gazelle-like or something.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that's cheating. I think that was completely legit.
No, definitely. I think so too.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope so. See you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Always
Thank
great to see you. Yep. There's Mark Grunier with Pray. And next is Steve Horrell.
I think I unmuted. Correct?
There you go.
You
hey,
did.
Steve. Yeah, good to see you.
Okay. This is such a short poem that I'm going to say a couple of words.
Okay.
Before,
well, as we know, the introduction is important.
Yes.
Through the week, I wrote a poem called Clarity, and then I wrote one called Charity. Well, I half wrote one called Charity. And then yesterday morning, when my neighbor and I, a woman that works for me on the farm, we harvested like 110 pounds of baby bok choy in 2 hours yesterday morning.
Wow.
So, but during that time, for some reason, we discussed rejection. and she's had quite a hard life, so it was an interesting conversation, although we were both very elated about being able to harvest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that was a good morning for me. Like, I thought, okay, I'm done. Like, I did enough work today. And I wrote this poem yesterday, and I called it Sustenance. And I'm going to read it. Anyway, all night, the ringing chorus, the clear amphibian applause for the festival of spring. Seeds awakening to their potential. A simple stir fry, thin strips of beef, lots of veggies, wine. A line in a poem you feel in your body. Human touch, the miracle of yet another morning. Amid seemingly endless rejection, I live on kernels of hope.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, good use of that turn.
And I'm not sure if it did what it was supposed to do.
I think it definitely did. Yeah, I was thinking of different kind of sustenance. Yeah, and really interesting. I've never seen, I don't know how it grows. Is it like corn-ish? Is that like a miss?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you talking about bok choy?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it's in the brassica family, and it grows like this.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. Really interesting poem. And
anyway, that was an aside for Dick, because Dick would know about.
And for us, I love farming stories. I want all the farming stories. They're fascinating.
They are.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to bail and get back to YouTube because I like to see the poems.
Yeah, well, that's a good reminder
Okay.
too. You know, everybody who's watching still on the Zoom can jump back to YouTube or Facebook to see what
Yeah.
we're talking about. Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Anyway, great evening. It's great. Okay.
Awesome, thanks. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye.
Yeah, that was Steve Harrell with Sustenance. And Rob Harris is next.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Rob, great to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I wanted to start by suggesting that anyone who's watching this should take part in, and this kind of dovetails into part of the conversation with Kim, was Home in Your Pocket Day is coming up
Oh,
on
really? I never heard of
Thursday.
that.
There's a
Wow.
date. What day is
No.
it?
Yeah, I never heard of that.
Thursday.
There's-
Go to
This
poets.org.
Thursday?
The first time I did it was 12 years ago. I wrote a story about it. I discovered a poem that had been written over 100 years ago. I thought I could find it online. I couldn't, so I typed it in on this new blog that I had just started. I put a link to it on the chat for the Zoom call. But yeah, it gives cover, and it was when I heard him say the words "poem in your pocket," I thought that's actually a real thing, and you can approach people, you know, that you work with or that you run into on the street and just pull a poem out of your pocket. It's a real organized thing. It's been going on for maybe 20 years. I've been doing it for about 12 now.
Oh, wow.
For the first bunch of years, I just carried someone else's poem, and then 3-4 years ago, I decided, well, I can do this myself. And so usually people get 2 or 3 stanzas and then they'll start to tune you out, so it's got to be pretty short. But I wrote one for last year. I wrote one that I'm going to use for this year. But yeah, please check it out. It's a lot of fun. I look forward to it every year in a weird kind of way. And there's a link to it actually on the YouTube chat too, if you want to go find it there.
Yeah, I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know how I've never heard.
I
of
know,
that.
me either. It also makes me want to wear an outfit with a lot of pockets.
That's true. I like cargo shorts.
It's cargo shorts. Wear cargo shorts.
Fit a lot of poems.
Fit a lot of poems in there.
People who know you will give you more slack than people who don't. But even in that situation, you've got maybe 60 seconds at most.
It forgets a little
People don't
league
really have the
practice.
attention span, but yeah,
Before we begin the
experience
game,
is
I would
done.
like to read this poem.
Read this poem, everyone. That's awesome.
idea.
I love that. I'm glad we heard about that, Rob.
I hope you do it. I hope somebody watching this tries it, because I tried it and it's fun. I don't know what more to tell you, but so that's my plug. So I wrote a poem called Coolie.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
This one has a prop, actually. I'll bring it in when the time is right. It goes like this. We have the modern luxury of not knowing what this word's unfortunate historical meaning is. For me, and perhaps most others, this word describes an insulated sleeve for keeping our drinks cold on a hot summer's day. But more than a century ago, this word was commonly used for describing someone brought to this country typically, but not always from China, to be exploited for their cheap labor. These people technically weren't slaves, but they weren't considered as citizens either. In 1862, during the Civil War, President Lincoln signed a law prohibiting the coolie trade from China. In the law's aftermath, Chinese people were allowed to voluntarily enter this country, at least until they were excluded entirely in 1882. Although it's a good thing that the coolie trade no longer exists, it's not such a good thing to have been forgotten about either.
Oh, that's really interesting. I had no idea. I was just thinking nothing about cooling.
Yeah.
I was reading a speech that Stephen Douglas gave about popular sovereignty and slavery a long time ago. And one of the things that he said was, he talked about the coolie that was being imported into this country. And I majored in history. I got a master's degree in history. I had no idea what coolie was. So I Googled it and it came up, and it seemed like almost a parallel to the slave trade. It was like a form of indentured servitude. And that was the term that Douglas felt like he could use it, and everybody knew what that meant. And here it was all these years later. I thought a coolie was, what you take to the beach.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
So I feel like, the lost meaning of the word, I'm glad I knew it. I'm kind of angry that I'd never encountered it before, but sometimes better late than not at all,
Yeah, well, really interesting. I love, learning stuff through poetry.
Yeah,
It's the best
definitely.
way to learn, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Not every poet informs, but every once in a while you can do that. So that's what I tried to do.
Well, very cool. Thanks, Rob. Yeah.
Thanks again. And remember, poem in your pocket.
Oh, I will not forget that. I'm going to start poem in your dress, poem under your hat,
Well, you
poem
do have
in your
some dresses
hair.
with pockets, so
I know.
there
The
you
dresses with pockets, even more important on Thursday.
They are.
Yeah, make sure you do it on Thursday because that's the Internet's day. So
Okay.
so it's a real thing.
We are so on.
We are.
Tim has no idea what I'm going to make him do with the
don't.
poems in his
It's
pocket.
true. All right.
Thanks again.
Well, thanks so much, Rob. Yeah, always a pleasure. There's Rob Harris with Cooley. Really interesting.
Yeah.
Next, let's go to Mary Lisa Diminishes.
Yay.
Diminishes.
Oh, no.
So I even messed up.
We have to tell her a story.
We do.
Mary Lisa.
Mary Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
So we were watching the original podcast
Stafford.
with Kim Stafford.
Yeah.
Episode 137, and that was the first time you were on the Rattlecast.
Yeah, we watched you. Yeah.
It was so fun to see that again.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And then I realized that I've been saying your name so wrong every time. And then I thought we had it down, and I said it the same way I keep saying it.
And then we rewound it, and we're like, and then Tim wrote it down.
I did. It's right here.
Wrote it down.
It's right on
We're
this little-
trying, Mary
Yeah,
Lisa.
so it's diminishes.
Diminishes, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Diminishes.
Diminishes.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry though.
I'm sorry.
But it was so fun though. Yeah.
Phonetically twice, and then I was just like, whatever.
Yeah, well, hearing it, I mean, they're so different from hearing it versus, trying to remember it that way.
Mhm.
So now hopefully I'll get it. But it was so fun to see the first time you were on.
the first time you called. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
It
great.
reminds me, I don't know why this is making me think of this, but Tim, you mentioned in one of your old Rattlecasts that you had done oh gosh, I can't think of the word, a write-up basically for some a blurb for somebody's book. And the other day I was just looking through my books and I happened to pull this one out because it's Box Turtle Press, and I love them because they printed and published Mudfish for so many years. Anyway, you said you couldn't remember what the other blurb was that you wrote. This is it. Like, oh my gosh. So my cousin who lives in Baltimore sent me this book probably like 8 years ago or something. And I just thought, oh, what a small world.
Wait,
so
what?
yeah,
I have no recollection of this. What is this book?
It's called Fires in Sonoma by Terry Fallon.
I have no recollection of this. What did I say about that book?
Yeah, what did you say, Mary Lisa?
It says, Husk is like a conversation with a long-lost friend, intimate enough for empathy, as exciting as gossip. Connecting the past with the present, Phelan lays all her truths on the table. And when the coffee cools, you'll want another cup.
Oh,
very
nice.
Trying to bring it, yeah.
Bringing that coffee
Very cool.
home.
I actually got a ton of blurbs back. That was the problem. So once I started, it was like, it was like one is great, and then then
it's really hard with your time. Yeah, it is really hard.
But that's why I have like a rule for blurbs now, which I decided, which is just a certain number a year.
Yeah,
that's smart.
That was the problem.
It's enough to keep all of our poems straight, let alone all of the blurbs that we, write for other people, right?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm so happy that I showed up. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we are too. It's just great to see you. Yeah.
And when we were watching it, I was like, I hope Mary Lisa's here tonight. We can bring this moment full circle, and then you're here. Yay!
Yeah. So it's over 100 episodes too. 103 since you first started coming. Yeah.
It's been that many.
Yeah.
Wow. So we're all connected. I always say we're all connected. We have to remember that.
Yeah,
for
you're
sure.
right.
Mm-hmm.
You never know in the future how somebody's going to touch your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or how they have in the past. So.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm going to read this poem.
Okay.
Great.
Oh, wait. Do I have the right one? Okay. April 5th, 2024. So I wrote this after watching about an hour of Terrence Hayes read his American Sonnets. And I didn't do it on purpose, but it ended up being a sonnet. And I was like, I can do this. I can make all this eternal rhyme into a sonnet. I can do this.
Great.
So, yeah. Oh, and we had a small earthquake here last week. So, and it was like right around the time that Taiwan was also having their earthquakes. So that's where this poem came between your prompt, the American sonnets and the earthquakes. Still working on the one word poem. So, okay. April 5th, 2024. We wait all day, then brace all week for aftershocks, tremors, earth slipping away from itself. We do that too. And more than a few of us don't move away after. We stay, endure what damage is done until it's repaired. Some leave for what they believe is safer terrain. But what is safety? Where? And whose map is used to get there? How does one reach a concept, a belief? When safety is only pure faith, we stand on more solid ground than where we were at the moment of impact, when Earth woke and the universe shrugged us off like a dream.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
I love that ending, that concept of shrugging off like a dream. That's great.
Yeah, because we don't we? Yeah, that's so true.
All right. Thank you for the platform and everything you guys do for all of us. It's a great community.
Oh, well, thanks so much for being part of it, Mary Lisa.
Thank you.
I'm happy. I'm honored to be a part of it.
Oh,
So, okay.
Thanks.
Hi.
Yeah, that was
Bye-bye.
Mary Lisa diminishes.
Yes.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I think you got it. I think she
it.
gave you like a passing grade on that last one. It was all worth it in the end.
Thanks so much, Mary Lisa. D diminishes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be saying this all night.
We will. We have to. It's like the gauntlet is thrown down.
Yeah, the gauntlet is thrown.
I cannot make mistakes again. Okay. Next up, we have Jared Campbell.
Hello.
Hey, Jared. Yeah, great to see you. How you doing tonight?
Doing all right. How are you?
Good.
I'm great.
Yep. So we're all doing introductions today.
I think we need to.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So this is written in the voice of someone who does mergers and acquisitions at a law firm.
Ah.
Right. So, stress. For the first hour, I'm focused. We discuss the same provisions we discussed on Tuesday and resolve the easy issues. The earn-out will require a lot of work. I annotate the draft as we progress, issue our position, their position, any resolution. How many times has wandering mind been redirected by the jolt of fear, an electric fence to keep me running in the proper ways and doing what I would prefer not to? I am the fence, and I am he who spasms brushing against the fence. I am the current running in the fence. Survival's done. We're discussing baskets now. And there's so many ways to get it wrong. I'm stretched taut as the wire in an electric fence, supported, elevated by my tension, and humming with invisible power. We're talking about materiality scrapes when something changes. Her words, or not her words, the meanings of her words all disappear as soon as they are said, evaporating like raindrops drizzling on a hot sidewalk. And soon I'm listening only to the rhythm of her speech, the pattern of emphases hitting like raindrops strike against a sidewalk, relentlessly.
A really interesting poem, Stress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that where you work? Is it true based on reality?
I don't work at a law firm anymore.
But you did?
Yeah, for a while.
It's a really creative use of stress to have it become like a physical stress from a mental one. That's neat.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. Yeah, thanks much as always, Jared. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. That was Jared Campbell with Stress. And last here, we have Kashiana Singh. Kashiana was the featured guest on Rattlecast number 134. It's great to see you again, Kashiana. How you doing?
Good to see you, Tim. I've been listening and watching, have been in a situation not to dial in, but I had to today because I wrote for the prompt. I think I sent you 2 emails. If you could please pull the second one. I sent the first one with a mistake. So
okay, did you send it to the open mic one?
Yes.
Okay, because that's the old one. We have prompt lines now, but okay.
Got it.
But let me I'll open that up one too. Okay, there we go. I have both. The second one. Okay. So, tell us about this. It's a haiku sequence.
Yes, and the word is scent.
Mm-hmm.
And as I think I shared earlier, I'm finalizing my new book, which is coming out later this year. It's called Witching Hour. And it speaks of a lot of things, but it also gets inspiration from my time with my grandson. So there was a poo poem. There is a poo poem in that, but I took the prompt and played on it further. So let me read it, and it should make sense.
Okay, oh, very cool. Let's hear it.
Smell of snow blurs the stink of an aging moon. Smell of snow blurs the stink of an aging moon. Spring blooms, murmurs of death on flaring nights. Spring blooms, murmurs of death on flaring nights. Mingled aromas washing your 100th diaper like the ceremonial first. Mingled aromas washing your 100th diaper like the ceremonial first.
Oh, that's really wonderful, Kashtiana. And we talked a lot about your, grandchild being born with the last Rattlecast. It's great to see that progress. What have you been up to lately in the last 2 years?
I did, it was a very humble project, but I had committed to doing a haiku environment illustration for toddlers. So I have like a haiku little booklet from A to Z with illustrations with somebody I collaborated with. So that's not yet live, but it's self-published. It should be live at some point on Amazon.
Oh, that's really
and then
wonderful.
I've been working on this book as well. The one other thing I want to say about this is I attended a workshop recently, which was about using your nose to write. That's why the scent thing, and I've been reading a lot about that over the last 3-4 weeks, and that's where like the smell of war, the stink of the moon, like you can smell the snow before it comes, and the animal Eclipse, like they don't only feel it, but they can also smell something in the air. So all of that was kind of playing in my mind to take the prompt.
That's wonderful. I think scent is so underutilized in all of poetry and haiku. So that's it's odd too when you think about how scent makes us think of memories, and yet it's underutilized in poetry. It seems like a disconnect.
And it's the first, and it's the first. I was studying again for the book, and it's the first sense at 10 weeks that comes alive for a fetus.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing all that, Kashtiana. It's always great to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. You both are awesome.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
That was Kashtiana Singh, of course, from Rattlecast number 134, if you want to learn a whole lot more about her. And that's going to wrap up the prompt lines for tonight. Let's see. So let's do a couple poems, a little bonus poems. Why not? So Dr. Q, who I saw on the chat, can't get the Zoom quite to work, but wants to join. Dr. Q has this poem called Cell. And here we go on this one. Let's see. We'll switch to this camera too. That'll be a little better. Okay. So Cell. Involuntary, committed to a padded room, cushions on the walls, confined in the cell, a mattress on the floor. There is no mirror above the tiny sink in the bathroom, and no stopper. A lone toilet and no seat, no tub to drown oneself, and always escorted there, pacing around the cell, flinging the body from one side of the cell to the other, collapsing, all energy drained. Energy slumps when cells become damaged or destroyed. Oxygen stops circulating. If one cell in the body could slide under the door, if just one cell could detach itself from the larger whole, then the next cell, the next, and the next, until every part of my body is on the other side of the door, how long would it take to reassemble the larger self one cell at a time? Skin cells reconstruct first, add the mitochondria, neurons, and nerve cells, etc. If one could vaporize on the other side, there would still be locks in the hallways. A padded brain, fully functioning brain cells would suggest the best course of action is to discover contraband, a wayward, confiscated cell phone, a call for help, somebody rescue me, rescue me.
Wow.
Very interesting. That's
Yeah.
big, huge, from a cell to a cell to a cell to a cell.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
a prison cell to a
Yeah.
body's cell
Mhm.
to a cell phone. Really interesting
yeah.
transitioning there.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing that. It was Dr. Q,
Mhm.
who you will recognize if you're watching the chat window on YouTube. And let's see what else we have. Do we have a Ted Guevara's got one? Ted, as always, includes an interesting photo. And the photo is this. It is a blue crab for those just watching at home.
A little easier to describe than some of the photos Ted provides, I have to say.
That is true. I mean, a crab that's blue.
He's energetic looking, the crab, I think we should note too. He looks like a happy little blue crab.
One of the things I always wondered about crabs, maybe you know since you're from Florida, you
Yeah.
probably like play with crabs or something.
I did
don't
have
know.
a lot of hermit crabs growing up for some reason.
Why do you like when I had a toy crab? There was like a action figure. There was a
Aw.
crab,
Uh-huh.
and one claw was like bigger than the other.
Mhm.
And I've noticed a few crabs have that. This one seems to have like a massive one claw, but not
Mhm.
the other. Is that normal? Is that how crabs all are?
I don't think they're all like that, but it's kind of like how we've been watching BattleBots lately.
True.
It's like advantageous to have the one big. It's a lot to carry around,
It
Look at
is.
this poor dude. He's trying his best.
Yeah.
I
I mean, I love evolution, and I never looked into why crabs
Why
might have
some
one
crabs have
one
one,
claw.
just
Like
the
it's like a
only-
right hand, I guess.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's
Anyway,
like a right hand. Sorry that you don't have a better answer to that
yeah.
question.
Well, you aren't.
I'm not a crab expert. It's true.
Okay, so let's read the poem though. And this is Cobbled by Ted Bernal Guevara. Yesterday, a long time ago, an aged artist walked out of this house and decided things must appear old and rectangular. Not necessarily, but it must have consistent grooves, thin, shallow, smooth. Yesterday, a long time ago, an aged artist older than Botticelli or Da Vinci even, decided things must be classic, rounded at the edges, so people won't trip on them. Centuries later, in Istanbul, Venice, Boston. Yesterday, a long time ago, an aged artist went out for a walk. He's due back not anytime soon. He's walking slowly. He's avoiding the cracks. He's now flailing. Uh-oh. He's now stoned. It's Cobble. Really fun twist at the end. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. It's always a pleasure
Thanks,
sharing your
it
poems,
is.
Ted. It is. And Ted, as he's sent a poem every week for 240.
Really impressive.
One episodes, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ted, as always. Are there any more we should do? Let's see. So Nivedita wasn't here on the Zoom. Let's share her poem really
Yes.
quickly. This is Yes by Nivedita. Yeah, so, okay. So here we go. Yes by Nivedita. She couldn't make it today. Of course, it's her work day and couldn't cut out, I guess, during work like she usually does. Here's today's poem. Yes. Saying yes is always good. It opens the door to opportunities and is a nod to the seemingly endless possibilities. It shows our acceptance to go with the flow. But sometimes yes can become a burden, putting more weight on our shoulders than can be borne. Then yes becomes a surrender of boundaries of the self, of us. And then saying yes is good no more. For it is in the yes that we lose ourselves, drowning in the obligations we did not choose. It is then that no becomes our salvation, helping us reclaim our lost autonomy and declare that we are worth it. So is saying yes always good? No.
Oh, what a great ending
That
to
is a
the
great
yes
ending,
poem.
Nivy.
No, that's
Yeah,
very
that's so
clever.
funny because I was thinking about that Cavafy poem, The Great Yes and the Great No.
Yeah, we were talking about that
Yeah,
recently.
we were, and there's the reason why some people have the great no,
Mhm.
and we need both, I guess, in some way, or else we'll all be saying yes to everything all the time. That's weird because that's exactly what I was thinking about
Yeah.
the other day. Anyway, thanks for sharing that, Nivi. Definitely a pleasure.
Thanks, Nivi.
Let's see, and this is a new poet. I think we'll wrap it up with this.
Okay.
This is Royden Saw, or J. Royden Saw, with a poem called, I don't know who this is. I've never appeared here before, but they emailed this in. This is Rubble. So here we go with this poem. Rubble. Rubble is a word that is soft and feminine, curvaceous and slightly suggestive, tender in mouthfeel, but the rebar is not felt on the tongue. Rubble does not evoke unfathomable weight, pinching the leg of a 6-year-old girl left to die of thirst or infection in her pocket of rubble. Rubble does not bring to mind the woman that was pregnant 37 seconds ago, now half inside, hidden half outside, for all to see, live stream 10,000 miles away, 2 funerals or 4 in the rubble. Rubble does not infer grit in eyes, grit in ruptured ears, grit in her mouth that may or may not be moving breath, may or may not be wailing in fear and pain and aloneness, may or may not be found. Rubble has disappeared hundreds, confirmed thousands, probable tens of thousands, possible. Rubble rubs life away. Cats in the rubble, dogs in the rubble, dads in the rubble, daughters in the rubble. Rubble is not a soft or a feminine word. Great use of that repetition.
It almost felt Guzzle-like in terms of its repetition, too, and how each stanza felt like it took us to a different place with the rubble.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, an excellent use of that transforming the word throughout the poem. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Yeah, and again, that poet was Jay Royden Saw, so thanks for sharing that, Jay. Now, that's going to wrap up the show for today. Let's move on to the Sciku, and we have something a little different for the Sciku this week.
We do?
Yeah, because... I hadn't written one yet.
Yeah, I was aware of that fact.
And I was going to write one right before the show.
Right.
But then Kim popped on the Zoom. And it was like 10 minutes earlier than people usually do.
Yeah, because...
And so...
Because he's being very nice, yeah.
He was, yeah. So we were like chatting, and I didn't want to be like, hey... Let's stop chatting so I can write my haiku.
Right, that would be kind of rude.
So I didn't actually write a haiku. It would have been rude. So I don't actually have a Sciku for the
So we're going to write one live?
We're going to write one live,
Or
exactly.
no, we're not.
Okay. So well, either we can write one live, we can see if we can do it, or...
we can do it, whatever, man.
Or we
Bring
can challenge people to... write the Sciku next week and see who gets the best Sciku, but we'll see what we can do.
Okay. I've never heard this article before, to be clear.
Yeah,
this is like some sort of like double dare challenge, I feel.
Double dare.
Double dare. All right, I'm ready.
Physical challenge.
Game time.
Okay. So this was the article I was thinking about. And here it goes. This is, I gotta get rid of it. Okay. So this was the article, and it was, Can Animals Count? Neuroscientists at City UHK and CUHK resolve long-standing debate. And so what they did is this really clever experiment. They had a bunch of mice who had to respond for feeding time, and they had these tones. And they had a certain number of tones, and if there was a certain number, they would get fed. So they would look habituated like that, like classical operant conditioning. But what they did is they had the number of tones the same, but the tones themselves varied in like pitch and tempo and sound and loudness and stuff to see if they could actually count. And it turns out between 3 and 7, I think, digits, the mice can totally count, which is really interesting because like some humans have trouble with number sense. And it seems to be some innate thing even in mice.
I've got it.
You've got it already?
Yeah.
So this is not... She had no idea we were doing that. Okay,
I don't know if it works, but I'm just going to... Okay, so my idea is it's a monoku.
Yeah.
And it's animals counting crackers, and then the split is kind of between the animals and then the humans counting the crackers. You know, that's my idea. Does that work? I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to do something with like counting calories, like...
Oh, okay.
Or like on the counter. I'm not sure exactly. Like on the counter, like some mouse...
Yes, this is our poetic process exposed.
Yeah. Well, that's as far as I got. So if anybody... Okay. So what was yours again?
Animals counting crackers as a monoku with the cut between it being like the animal crackers are counting themselves as an idea, and then the humans are counting the animal crackers.
Okay, let's see.
This is how I feel.
Counting crackers.
I'm not saying it's gold, but I'm saying it came fast.
Well, it did come fast. That's great. This is our Sciku for the week. Animals counting crackers.
I kind of love this. I wish we could do this every week.
Maybe we should.
And honestly, it came to me right when you gave me the title.
Yeah.
Just kind of, I just let you talk though.
Well, there you go. Well, that is the Sciku of the week. That is the show for this week. Thanks, Katie, for coming up with that one. And if anybody has any other attempts at it, feel free to share it. Haiku or brief, so you can share it in addition to your prompt poem next week.
Eat some animal crackers to inspire you.
Exactly. Please do. And the Sciku for this week is... Or not the Sciku.
No,
we did that. The prompt. We did that. The prompt for this week is to... Write a poem to share on social media about what poetry means to you. So take it away, Katie. What did you mean by that?
I am super excited about this one. When I knew Tim was talking to Kim Stafford, it's, one of the things I'm absolutely most passionate about is the idea of curation, of sharing your poems on social media, of not hoarding your poems, of getting more poems out into the open. And so I'm challenging everyone to share the poem on social media and to write a poem about what poetry means to you. Mary Keating had a poem that could count for this week earlier in the prompt lines if she chose to share that on social media. So I really want to encourage the sharing of poems. And of course, we also have Kim Stafford's challenge issued during the Rattlecast of writing a poem for someone, which I love too. So if you end up doing both, then you can tell us in the prompt lines and I'll be extra impressed.
Bonus points.
Bonus points.
Okay, well, that's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that, Katie. So that, once again, the prompt was to... We'll show it one more time. Write a poem to share on social media. That's write a poem to share. So you're thinking about the fact that you're going to share it as you do it, like Kim does. He can't help it because he does it every day.
Right.
Write a poem to share on social media about what poetry means to you.
And I also want to just say one more thing on this. It doesn't have to be just that you've run with this exact prompt. You can show, not tell in this instance too. I mean, we always prefer that anyway. But you can write a poem about that speaks to you about the power that can be expressed in poetry, and that can be. It doesn't have to be just like an Ars Poetica. I will take this loosely, just written to share.
Yeah, well, we take everything loosely right
yeah,
here.
that's
The
true.
best poem.
Nobody's like, man, that Katie Dozier, she's strict.
That's true. Anyway, that is the prompt for this week. And another show note. So as we mentioned last time on the critique of the week, I think we might have mentioned this last time. I've been trying to move the show to Sunday nights because I think Sunday's a better night just in general.
I agree.
Fewer conflicts. Myself too. My son's got like Little League stuff going on Mondays these days, and my daughter has theater practice or rehearsal.
There are a lot of things between 4 kids.
There are, yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on Mondays, and we decided to move back. And it's also like it's sort of a, poetry is a kind of a church. And so it's a great day for that. So we're moving it back to Sundays. And we're starting that this week coming up. So only 5 days until the next Rattlecast, if you can believe it. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be... wrong one.
He was great, though.
He was great. Next week's guest is going to be Gerald Lachlan, a tribute to Gerald Lachlan. So Gerald Lachlan, and the actual guest is going to be Clint Margrave, who edited this book, Requiem for the Toad. And Gerald Lachlan is one of those gritty, down-to-earth poets that came out of the L.A. area, that kind of genre of poetry. He was the mentor of Clint Margrave, who was a previous guest on the Rattlecast. Also, Raymond Hammond published his book, published a lot of Gerald Lachlan's books. He was the guest last month, so a lot of things coming into congruence with this episode. But it's going to be really fun to talk about the life and history of Gerald Lachlan with both Clint Margrave and his 2 literary executors who helped Clint put this selected poems book together posthumously. He was a professor of mine at USC for one semester, and it's just such a great character and great person and lover of poetry. We're going to talk all about Gerald Lachlan. If you don't know who he is, you'll learn all about it this Sunday. That's Sunday, April 21st, regular time now, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on a Sunday. That's the Rattlecast number 242. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later.
Good night.